Greetings, Lore Masters. Tonight our chronicle covers the tangled, chaotic roots that anchor the history of the lands between, the era before the Golden Leaves, before the Shattered Ring, and long before a Tarnished of no renown decided to wage war on the gods themselves. We're drifting back to the very beginning, where the lines between beast, man, and divine were not just blurred, but non-existent. Picture a world teeming with raw, unrefined life energy, a place where the air itself feels heavy with potential, and the ground beneath your feet pulses like a slow, sleeping heartbeat. It is a time of red-gold hues and primal fury. Let's be honest, you probably wouldn't survive a trip to this primordial era without a maxed-out vigor stat and some serious enchanted gear, considering everything back then was bigger, angrier, and had way more horns than is strictly necessary for polite society. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Go ahead and drop a comment letting me know where in the world you are resting your head tonight and what time it is. I always love seeing how far our campfire circle extends. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. We begin by looking past the towering majesty of the Erdtree. When you first step out of the Chapel of Anticipation and gaze across Limgrave, that massive glowing tree dominates the horizon. It stands as the ultimate symbol of order, of Marika's reign, and of the Golden Order that governs reality. But history, much like the geography of the lands between, is built in layers. If you dig beneath the capital, beneath the roots, and look far back into the temporal distance, you find the Crucible. Before the Erdtree was the clean yellow-gold monoculture we see today, all life was blended together in the Crucible. This was the primordial form of the Erdtree, a chaotic, writhing melting pot where all distinct forms of life were merged. Imagine a great cosmic soup of vitality. In this era, biology wasn't fixed. The rigid taxonomies that separate a human from a beast, or a bird from a reptile, simply hadn't solidified yet. It was a time of evolution on overdrive, where features we now consider distinct were shared freely. This is why, if you pay attention to the architecture and the oldest descriptions in the game, you realize that the ancient world didn't view mutations as curses. They were signs of the divine. The Crucible is often described as red-tinged gold, a warmer, rustier, more organic colour compared to the blinding sterile yellow of the modern Golden Order. It evokes the colour of blood mixed with light, a visceral reminder that life is messy, violent, and vibrant. One of the most concrete pieces of evidence players encounter regarding this era comes in the form of the Crucible Knights. We have all fought them. We have all died to them. We have all panicked when they grew giant golden wings and dive-bombed us from across the arena. These knights, with their distinctively heavy reddish-gold armour, serve as living fossils of that bygone age. There are 16 of them scattered throughout the game, silent sentinels serving a master that time has largely forgotten. The core in-game fact here is that these knights draw their power directly from that ancient Crucible. When they manifest a giant tail to swipe your legs out from under you, or sprout horns to shoulder check you into oblivion, they aren't using magic in the way a glintstone sorcerer does. They are channeling the primal essence of life itself, recalling a time when humanity possessed the traits of other creatures. Their armour tells a story that most players scroll past in the inventory screen. The description of the Crucible Axe Helm reveals that these knights served Godfrey, the first Elden Lord. In the early days of Godfrey's age, the Crucible was still revered. The knights were considered the elite, the absolute pinnacle of martial prowess and divine blessing. The chaotic strength of the Crucible was useful for conquering a hostile world. But here lies the obscure lore tidbit that paints a tragic picture of cultural shifting. Over time, as the Golden Order became more dogmatic and obsessed with perfection and purity, the source of the Knights' power became taboo. The very strength that made them heroes eventually made them pariahs. The text explicitly states that as time passed, the strength of the Crucible and the knights who wielded it came to be treated with disdain. They went from being the celebrated champions of the Colosseums to being viewed as chaotic relics, embarrassing reminders of a savage past that the civilized Golden Order wanted to sweep under the rug. It is a classic case of history being written by the victors, or in this case, by the obsessive perfectionists. The society of the lands between underwent a massive gentrification of the soul. Features that were once signs of blessing, wings, tails, horns, feathers, became signs of the omen. This creates a fascinating dissonance in how we view the enemies in the game. When you fight a Crucible Knight, you are fighting a man who has held onto his principles for thousands of years, even as the world around him decided that his very existence was unclean. They are stoic, unwavering, and incredibly tough, likely because they have had to endure centuries of social isolation while guarding the remnants of their era. This concept of the Crucible explains the tragedy of the Omen and the Misbegotten, creatures we slaughter by the hundreds without much thought. The Misbegotten, those chimeric enemies with wings and scales often found in Castle Morn or the Haligtree, are described as having had contact with the Crucible. In the eyes of the modern Golden Order, they are misbegotten, mistakes, punishments, impurities. But in the eyes of the Crucible, they are perhaps closer to the original state of life than any purebred human. They display the chaotic variety of the primordial soup, a blend of avian, reptilian, and mammalian traits. They are not mutants in the scientific sense of genetic damage. They are throwbacks. They are walking anachronisms, living in a world that has legislated their biology out of existence. Similarly, the Omen, those large horned ogres like Morgott and Mog, are victims of this theological shift. An Omen is born with horns all over their body. In the age of the Crucible, a budding horn was a sign of being chosen, a little nod from the divine saying, "You are strong." In Marika's age, it is a curse. The Omen Bairn item description tells us that Omen babies have their horns excised, cut off, which usually kills them. Those who survive, the wealthy or royal ones like the Golden Lineage twins, are shackled and thrown into the sewers. It's a brutal, visceral example of how the definition of sacred is entirely arbitrary. The Greater Will didn't change the biology of the Omen, it just changed the marketing. The horns are the same, only the perception has shifted from Halo to Horns of the Devil. There is a thriving debate within the lore community regarding the relationship between the Great Tree and the Erd Tree, which ties directly into the nature of the Crucible. Some translators and lore hunters argue that the Great Tree was a distinct physical entity that existed before the Erd Tree, and that the Erd Tree is essentially a golden parasite that grafted itself onto the Great Tree's root system. The Crucible would be the rootstock of this original Great Tree. This theory suggests that the Golden Order is an invasive species, a cosmic kudzu that took over the local flora and claimed it was there all along. Supporters of this theory point to the root resin item description, and the way the roots in deep root depths look interwoven, as if two different root systems are competing or merging. However, others argue that Great Tree is simply a mistranslation or a poetic synonym for the primeval form of the Erd Tree itself, implying a natural evolution rather than a parasitic takeover. They argue that the Crucible matured into the Erd Tree, just as a wild sapling might be pruned and shaped into a disciplined bonsai. If the parasitic theory is true, it adds a layer of sinister colonialism to the Greater Will. It suggests that the native life of the lands between, the chaotic, horned, tailed life of the Crucible, was colonized by a golden star beast that enforced a rigid, alien order upon a messy, organic world. The imagery of the Crucible is also tied to the concept of the spiral. You see it in the spiral incantations used by the Hornsent in the Shadow Realm, and even in the twisting columns of Farum Azula. The spiral represents the upward, chaotic flow of evolution, reaching toward the heavens not in a straight line, but in a desperate, winding struggle. The Crucible is the bottom of that spiral. It is the raw material. It is the clay before it was fired in the kiln of the Golden Order. When we invoke the aspects of the Crucible incantations, we are briefly tapping into that lost current. We grow a tail, we breathe fire from a throat pouch that shouldn't exist. We manifest the wings of a primordial drake. It feels heavy, impactful, and physical. Unlike the fleeting light of glintstone, Crucible magic feels like it has mass. It hits like a truck because it utilizes the physical stuff of life. We must also consider the role of the Siluria and Ordovis, the two named Crucible Knights. Ordovis wields a great sword, while Siluria wields a spear that resembles a tree. Siluria's tree, the weapon, is modelled after the primordial form of the Erd Tree. If you look closely at the weapon, it doesn't look like the Erd Tree we know. It looks twisted, organic, almost like a drill or a root system pulled from the earth. It is a snapshot of what the Divine looked like before Marika cleaned it up. It's a reminder that the Order in Golden Order is an imposition. The natural state of the world is chaos, mixture, and hybrid vigour. The Crucible Knights are the monks of this lost religion, silently judging the frail, hornless tarnished who run around casting pebbles of blue light. In a way, the story of the Crucible is the story of civilization suppressing nature. It is the paved road over the forest floor, the Golden Order paved over the Crucible, hiding the messy reality of life beneath a veneer of gold leaf. But as any gardener knows, you can only suppress the roots for so long before they crack the pavement. The Omen, the Misbegotten, and the swaying tales of the Crucible Knights are the grass pushing through the concrete, reminding the lands between that before there was order, there was life, red, raw, and beautifully terrifying. If the Crucible represents the chaotic, bubbling roots of the world deep underground, then our gaze must drift upward to witness where the ancient order has calcified in the sky. Farum Azula. Just the name evokes a sense of dust, wind, and the inevitable decay of empires. To reach this place, one usually has to commit a cardinal sin, burning the Erd Tree, or take a very confusing nap in a belfry. Crumbling Farum Azula is not merely a city in the clouds, it is a mausoleum caught in the throat of a temporal storm. While the rest of the lands between marches forward into rot, war, and stagnation, Farum Azula is held in a suspension of violent stillness. It is crumbling, yes, but it has been crumbling for an eternity, every falling brick trapped in a loop of destruction that never quite hits the ground. The core in-game fact that anchors this section is the existence of Dragon Lord Placidusax. Most players stumble upon him by accident, or more likely by following a cryptic message left on the floor by a stranger that says, "Try lying down." Deep within the tempest-torn ruins, down a perilous path of floating rocks that makes even the most confident platformer sweat, there is a hollowed-out section of masonry. When the Tarnished lies down in one of the empty graves, time doesn't just pass, it reverses. The cutscene clearly shows the storm accelerating backward, the debris reassembling, and reality shifting until we are in the eye of the storm. Here resides Placidusax, a two-headed dragon suspended in a meditative hover. But the text explicitly identifies him as a Dragon Lord, and notes that he was an Elden Lord in the age before the Erd Tree. This changes everything we understand about the title Elden Lord. It isn't a title invented by Marika for Godfrey, it is a cosmic position that predates humanity's dominance entirely. Placidusax is a tragic figure, a king waiting for a phone call that will never come. The remembrance of the Dragon Lord tells us that his god fled, and so he waits in the storm beyond time for their return. This implies that the dynamic of Elden Lord plus a god vessel is a constant law of this universe. Marika has Godfrey, and later Radagon. Placidusax had someone, or something. The identity of this fled god is one of the great voids in the lore, a blank space that the community has desperately tried to fill with theories about the One Great, or an avatar of the greater will that abandoned the dragons because they were perhaps too strong, or simply because their era had ended. But let's look closer at the dragon himself. The obscure lore tidbit here is found in the iconography of the Old Lord's talisman. The talisman depicts a legendary Elden Lord, presumably Placidusax, but the carving shows a dragon with 4 heads. If you look at the model of Placidusax in the boss arena, you can see the jagged scarred stumps on his neck where 3 heads have been severed. He currently has 2. This implies that at his prime, the Dragon Lord had 5 heads. This number, 5, is significant. It mirrors the 5 fingers, a symbol of the intelligence that predates the split between the 2 fingers, order, and the 3 fingers, chaos. It suggests that under the dragons the world was whole. The split of the hand and the decapitation of the Dragon Lord mirrors the fracturing of reality itself. This leads to the fascinating reality of the ancient dragon's immortality. They are not immortal in the biological sense of just having really good cells. They are immortal because their scales are made of gravel stone. The description of the gravel stone seal and the scales themselves reveals that these scales are not of this world and are capable of slightly twisting time. The ancient dragons don't just endure time, their very physical form resists it. Their stone scales are anchors. This is why the weapon developed to kill them, the bolt of Grandsax or the various lightning spears, relies on piercing that stone. When you fight a dragon in Elden Ring, you aren't fighting a lizard. You're fighting a geological formation that hates you. The storm in Farum Azula is likely an extension of Placidusax's own nature, a massive projection of his ability to twist time, creating a sanctuary where he can wait forever without aging a day. There is a prevalent fan theory, and a very compelling one, regarding the Elden Ring itself in this era. If you navigate to Malekith's arena, which is also in Farum Azula, look at the wall behind him. There is a depiction of the Elden Ring, but it looks wrong. It's wilder. It has more runes. It has roots spreading out in a complex tangled lattice that looks nothing like the rigid geometric symbol Radagon displays inside the Erd Tree. This is the Dragon's Elden Ring. It confirms that the Elden Ring is not a static object. It is a malleable metaphysical construct that changes shape depending on who is in charge. In the Age of Dragons, the ring was complex and primal, reflecting a beast-centric order. Marika later plucked runes out of it, like the Rune of Death, simplifying the design to suit her desire for a deathless, controllable world. The version in Malekith's room is a snapshot of the laws of physics before Marika edited the code. The environment of Farum Azula also tells a story of a lost high culture. We often think of beasts in fantasy as savages, living in mud huts or caves. But the beastmen of Farum Azula are the original architects. They built a floating necropolis with intricate masonry, plumbing and statuary. The Beastman Cleaver description mentions that beastmen possess 5 fingers, a sign of high intelligence in this setting. They were the first to gain sensibility. The tragedy is palpable as you walk through the ruins. You see these beastmen, skeletal and rotting, still frantically praying at altars, still guarding the hallways of their long-gone masters. They have been abandoned by their god. Their city is falling apart and their lord is comatose in a time bubble, yet they persist. It is a level of loyalty that puts the Golden Order's knights to shame. Furthermore, the existence of Farum Azula challenges the geography of the entire map. Where was it originally? Some lore hunters speculate that Farum Azula was once on the ground, perhaps located in the centre of the map where the Divine Towers converge, the area now occupied by the cloud-covered sea. If you trace the lines from the 6 Divine Towers, they intersect perfectly in the middle of the ocean. Was the impact of a falling star, arguably the Elden Beast itself, what shattered the land and sent Farum Azula launching into the sky? It would explain the crumbling nature. It's not just old, it's wreckage from a cosmic impact event. The ruins we find scattered across Limgrave and Liurnia, those massive chunks of temple stone with the same architectural style, are likely debris that fell from this floating city over the millennia. Every time you ride Torrent past one of those ruins, you're riding past a piece of the prehistoric capital that fell out of orbit. The presence of the Godskin duo in the Dragon Temple adds another layer of intrigue. Why are the Godskins, the hunters of gods, present in the sacred home of the dragons? They are likely seeking the Rune of Death, which Malekith holds. But their presence implies that Farum Azula is not just a tomb, it is a vault. It holds the one thing Marika fears most, destined death. The city is a prison for the concept of mortality. By banishing the Rune of Death to the sky, to a place outside of time, Marika ensured her eternal age. But as we know, nothing stays buried forever. The very fact that we can reach Farum Azula means the quarantine has failed. Let's not overlook the banished knights who roam these halls. These knights, wearing armour altered by the winds, are mercenaries of a sort, or perhaps penitents. The banished moniker implies they were kicked out of their homelands, likely Stormvale or Saul, and found service here, in the final frontier of the Dishonoured. They utilise wind attacks, mimicking the storm dragons they serve. It's a beautiful example of environmental storytelling. The knights adopt the techniques of the dragons, just as the Crucible knights adopted the aspects of the primal soup. In Elden Ring, you become what you worship, or at least, you become what you stand next to for long enough. Finally, the Placidusax fight itself is a masterclass in environmental storytelling through mechanics. The music stops, the thunder quiets. You're in an arena that feels like the surface of the moon, dusted with gold. When Placidusax summons his massive lightning nuke, the sound cuts out completely before the impact, an acoustic phenomenon that mimics the reality of a blast wave moving faster than sound. It emphasises that this creature is a force of nature. He doesn't cast spells, he commands the atmosphere, and when we defeat him, we aren't just killing a boss, we're closing the book on an age that refused to die. We're euthanizing the past. With the Dragon Lord gone, the last anchor holding Farum Azula in its stasis is severed. One has to wonder, after we leave, does the city finally succumb to gravity and crash into the sea? Or does it drift forever, a ghost ship in the high atmosphere, inhabited only by skeletons and the memory of a five-headed god? From the suspended animation of the high atmosphere, we must now descend. We drop past the surface, past the soil, and into the dark, damp recesses of the world, where the water refuses to flow. If Farum Azula is a monument to air and stasis, the deep-root depths are a testament to water and grotesque evolution. Here we confront one of the most disturbing and visually confusing transformations in the entire Elden Ring mythos, the fate of Godwyn the Golden. Most players know the basic beat of the story. Godwyn was the first demigod to fall in the Night of Black Knives. But death in the lands between is rarely the end. It is usually just a career change. The core in-game fact is a heavy one. Godwyn's body is physically present at the roots of the Erd Tree, located in the deep-root depths. But if you have stood before this corpse, you know that body is a generous term. It does not look like a man. It does not look like a demigod. It looks like a bloated, washed-up leviathan from the deepest trench of a Lovecraftian ocean. His face is flattened and widened into the shape of a giant clam. He has fins. He has a massive scaly tail. The Prince of Death has effectively become a merman, but not the Disney kind, more the drowned sailor decomposing for a century kind. The question that keeps lore hunters awake at night is, why? Why did the golden boy of the Pantheon turn into a fish? To understand this, we have to look at the metaphysics of death in this universe. When the Black Knife assassins struck, a ritualistic split occurred. Ranni the witch orchestrated the murder of her own flesh to free her spirit, while simultaneously murdering Godwyn's spirit to kill his soul. It was a trade. Ranni's body died, but her soul lived on in a doll. Godwyn's soul died, but his body lived on. And that is the horror. A demigod's body, brimming with unparalleled vitality and the power of the Crucible, was left without a pilot. Without a consciousness to maintain its self-image, the body began to revert. It began to mutate wildly, unchecked by the mind's imposing order. This brings us to the obscure lore tidbit that explains the aquatic theme. In Japanese folklore and Shinto concepts, which heavily influence FromSoftware's design philosophy, stagnation is synonymous with corruption, or kagara. Purity is found in flowing water. Think of the running streams that keep the Scarlet Rot at bay in the Blue Dancer's lore. Stagnant water, however, breeds ghosts, disease, and impurity. Godwyn is the ultimate stagnation. He is a massive biological dam blocking the natural cycle of the Erd Tree. He cannot die, he cannot move, he cannot pass on. He just sits there, soaking in the primal energies of the roots. Because he is stagnant, his environment has become a metaphorical swamp, and his biology has adapted to match. He is turning into a creature of the deep because he is drowning in life that cannot end. This aquatic corruption is not limited to his main body. It is spreading like a cancer through the root network. If you look closely at the deathroot items you feed to Gurranq, they aren't just dried wood. They have eyes. They have a wet, fleshy texture. The deathblight thorns that impale you, those aren't just thorns. They are patterned like insect legs or crustacean limbs. The corruption of Godwyn is turning the very earth into a seabed. We see this manifested most clearly in the Tibia Mariners. These skeletal boatmen are a source of confusion for many. Why are they rowing boats in the middle of a forest or a ruin? Why is there a boat in the mountaintops? Because to those who live in death, the land is water. The corruption of the Prince of Death has overlaid a spiritual ocean atop the physical reality. The mariners are navigating the waters of death that are spilling out from Godwyn's corpse. When they blow their horns and summon giant skeletons, they are dredging them up from this metaphysical deep. The presence of the Tibia Mariners is a warning. The tide is rising, and it is a tide of necrotic sludge. There is a genuinely unsettling detail regarding the local wildlife that many players miss because they're too busy running for their lives. Go to the area around the capital outskirts or Liurnia and find the giant crabs and lobsters. If you manage to kill one and flip the camera to look at their shells, or simply observe them closely, you will see a face. It is the face of Godwyn. His visage is growing on the backs of the crustaceans like barnacles. This implies that the corruption has entered the food chain. The water tables are infected with his death, and the animals living in the water are physically manifesting his likeness. It is a biological horror concept straight out of Annihilation. Godwyn isn't just a guy in a basement, he's becoming the biosphere. Then there is the surrogate face under Stormveil Castle. If you drop down the treacherous jumping puzzle behind the castle, passing the bats and the structural weaknesses, you find a massive, wooden, fleshy face embedded in the ground. This is not Godwyn's actual body, that's in Deeproot. This is a pustule. It is a cyst that grew so large and potent it developed the likeness of the host. This thing under Stormveil is the source of the deathroot spreading through Limgrave. Rogier, the poor sorcerer who pokes around where he shouldn't, gets infected here. He contracts the condition that eventually sprouts deathblight thorns from under his cloak. When you talk to him, he sounds tired, heavy. He is literally drowning on dry land, his lungs filling with the metaphysical silt of the Prince of Death. Let's talk about the basilisks, the death frogs, with the big fake eyes. In Dark Souls, they petrified you. In Elden Ring, they inflict deathblight. Their presence is always a sign that Godwyn's influence is nearby. But look at their design again. They are amphibious. They fit perfectly into this stagnant ocean theme. They are the bottom feeders of Godwyn's new ecosystem. The fact that they appear in the Lake of Rot and the Deeproot depths suggests a connection between the different types of biological decay, but the deathblight is distinct. It is darker, colder. It summons flies that buzz with a sound like drowning gasps. The tragedy of this transformation is highlighted by the story of Fortisax. This mighty dragon was Godwyn's best friend. In the ancient war against the dragons, Godwyn defeated Fortisax, but instead of killing him, he befriended him, a very anime protagonist move. When Godwyn died, Fortisax couldn't let go. The dragon entered the dream of the Prince of Death, diving into his coma to try and fight off the corruption from the inside. But you cannot fight a corruption that is merely life overflowing. Fortisax failed. When we fight the Lich Dragon in the dream, he is rotting. He is corrupted by the very death he tried to conquer. He wields red death lightning, a fusion of the ancient dragon's golden electricity and the sepia-toned fog of Godwyn's blight. It is a heartbreaking narrative told entirely through item descriptions and a boss fight, the loyal hound refusing to leave his master's grave, eventually dying of the same disease. There is a fan theory that suggests Godwyn's aquatic form is a callback to the Japanese Ningyo, mermaid, myth. Eating the flesh of a Ningyo grants immortality, but often at a terrible cursed price. In a way, the Erd Tree is eating Godwyn. His body is tangled in the roots, being digested by the system. But because he is the Prince of Death, the digestion is going in reverse. He is poisoning the tree. The immortality he provides is the curse of those who live in death. Skeletons that reassemble, spirits that cannot fade. He has broken the cycle of recycling that the Erd Tree relies on. He is the indigestion of a god. Consider also the visual language of the Prince of Death's staff and the Eclipse Shotel. They are dark, muddy and organic. The staff looks like a branch of petrified coral. The Shotel represents the eclipse, the sun, Sol, being swallowed by a dark body. The symbolism is thick. The Golden Order is the sun, and Godwyn is the dark water rising to extinguish it. The Age of the Duskborn ending, which utilises the mending rune of the Death Prince, results in a world covered in a grey, sweeping fog. It doesn't look like a kingdom of men, it looks like a seabed exposed to the air. The colours are desaturated, the light is diffused. It is a world where the distinction between life and death has dissolved into a murky grey soup, much like the Crucible we discussed earlier, but colder, deadlier. The horror of Godwyn is not just that he is a monster, it is that he is a victim. He didn't ask for this. He was the golden child, the diplomat, the warrior. Now he is a blind, deaf, mute clam god festering in the dark, his very existence acting as a radioactive isotope poisoning the world's groundwater. And the worst part, he might still be growing. The face under Stormveil has eyes that seem to track you. The roots are spreading. If the Tarnish didn't intervene, one has to wonder how long it would take before the entire continent of the lands between was just one giant, gasping coral reef of flesh and bone. So, the next time you see a crab in Luonia, maybe don't look too closely at the markings on its shell. And if you hear the sound of flies buzzing in a cave, remember that you aren't just walking into a trap. You're walking into the digestive tract of a demigod who forgot how to die. From the stagnant, suffocating swamps of the deep-root depths, we drift laterally through the subterranean crust to a place that feels less like a grave and more like a tomb for a dream. We arrive at the Eternal Cities, Nokron and Nokstella. If you have ever taken that impossibly long elevator ride down the Siofra River well, you know the feeling of the reveal. The stone walls give way, and suddenly you're staring at a night sky. A vast, glittering cosmos of stars and nebulae stretches out before you, but it is a lie. It is a false sky, a geological illusion trapped miles beneath the surface. This is the home of the Nox, a civilization that committed a crime so profound that the Greater Will didn't just execute them, it buried them alive and turned off the sun. The core in-game fact driving this section revolves around the hidden treasure of Nokron. When we join Ranni's questline, she asks us to retrieve this treasure. We fight our way through mimic tears and ancestral spirits to find a chest containing the Fingerslayer blade. The item description is chillingly direct. The hidden treasure of the Eternal City of Nokron, a blade said to have been born of a corpse. This blood-drenched fetish is proof of the high treason committed by the Eternal City and symbolizes its downfall. This isn't just a dagger. It is a weapon specifically engineered to harm the vassals of the Greater Will, the Two Fingers. In a world where the Two Fingers are the direct telephone line to God, forging a pair of scissors designed to cut that line is the ultimate heresy. The Nox were not always subterranean dwellers. The lore suggests they were once surface inhabitants, perhaps even the dominant culture before the Erdtree took root. They were a civilization of stargazers, astronomers who looked to the cosmos for guidance rather than to a golden tree. But their ambition curdled into rebellion. They didn't want to serve the Greater Will, they wanted to supplant it. The Fingerslayer blade is the smoking gun. It reveals that the Nox were not just passive observers, they were active combatants in a theological war. They tried to weaponize death against the envoys of order, and for that, the Greater Will dropped the cosmic hammer. The earth opened up, and their beautiful marble cities were swallowed whole, condemned to a twilight existence under a rocky ceiling. But let's look at the people themselves. The Nox Swordstress and the Night Maiden enemies we encounter move with a fluid, unnatural grace. Their armour isn't rigid plate, it is flowing silk that is actually a liquid metal, likely a derivative of the silver tears found in the area. This brings us to a fascinating obscure lore tidbit. The Nox were obsessed with creating a lord. Since they rejected the Greater Will system of Empyreans and Elden Lords, they tried to build their own. The Silver Tears, those amorphous blobs that transform into players, are failed experiments. The item description for the Silvertear mask states, "The Silvertear makes mockery of all things. Eventually the Silvertear became a lord." This refers to their attempt to forge a Lord of Night. They were trying to bioengineer a god in a vat. This context makes the Mimic Tear boss fight much more poignant. You aren't just fighting a shapeshifter, you're fighting the culmination of centuries of desperate alchemy. The Nox, trapped in the dark, looked at their own reflection and tried to grant it divinity. They failed. They created mimics, shadows, and hollow shells, but never a true lord. This failure creates a pervasive sense of melancholy in the Eternal Cities. You see giant skeletons sitting on massive thrones in Nokron. Who are they? Are they the ancestors of the Nox? Are they the failed experiments that grew too large? Or are they simply monuments to what the Nox wished they could be? The game never explicitly tells us, leaving us to wander among the shins of dead giants, wondering about the scale of this lost civilization. The treason of the Nox extends beyond just the blade. They are masters of cold sorcery. In Elden Ring, temperature is theological. Heat, fire, and light are associated with the Erdtree, the Fell God, and the Frenzied Flame, active burning forces. Cold, dark, and moon are associated with the Carians and the Nox. The Nox monks wear high, pointed hoods and wield hammers that extend like fluid whips. They are the antithesis of the Golden Order. While the Golden Order seeks to illuminate and reveal, the Nox seek to obscure and hide. Their very existence is a secret kept by the Earth itself. There is a massive fan theory and community debate surrounding the connection between the Nox and the Numen. When you create a character, the Numen template description says they are descendants of denizens of another world, and long-lived but seldom born. Marika herself is a Numen. The Black Knife assassins who killed Godwyn are also Numen. Here is the kicker. The armour of the Black Knife assassins is described as being forged in the Eternal City. This implies a deep blood connection between Marika, the assassins, and the banished Nox. The theory goes like this. Marika and the Nox come from the same stock. At some point there was a schism. Marika chose the greater will and ascended to the surface to become a god. The rest of her people, the Nox, refused, rebelled, and were banished. This adds a layer of personal betrayal to the history. Did Marika sell out her own people to gain power? Is the high treason of the Eternal City actually a civil war between factions of Numen? This would explain why the Black Knife assassins, Nox-aligned women, were willing to work with Ranni to kill Marika's son. It wasn't just a political assassination, it was ancient familial revenge. The women in the silver armour waited thousands of years in the dark for the chance to stab the golden lineage in the back. The environment of the Eternal Cities reinforces this theme of artificiality and longing. The stars in the ceiling are likely bioluminescent fungi or crystals cultivated to mimic the sky they lost. The dragonkin soldiers found down here add another layer to the tragedy. These giant crawling beasts look like dragons, but they are twisted. The dragon scale blade description tells us, alas, the dragonkin soldiers never attained immortality and perished as decrepit, pale imitations of their skyborn kin. The Nox tried to recreate dragons just as they tried to recreate lords. They built them in the dark, gave them frozen lightning, blue lightning distinct from the gold-red of real dragons, and set them to guard their cities. But like everything the Nox touch, it is a pale imitation. It is a cargo cult of divinity. They build the shape of power without the soul of it. This silver motif stands in direct opposition to gold. In alchemy, which Elden Ring borrows from heavily, gold is perfection, the sun, the male principle. Silver is the moon, the reflection, the female principle, often associated with fluidity and change. The Nox are the silver civilization. Their blood has turned into the milky white substance we see in the Albinaurics, who we will discuss later. They are mutable, shifting, and undefined. If the Golden Order is a rigid statute, the Nox are a pool of mercury. They cannot be broken because they have no fixed shape, but they also cannot stand tall. Consider the finger slayer aspect again. The blade looks like a twisted piece of spine or bone. It is organic. It suggests that to kill the divine, you need something that is antithetical to holiness. Something born of a corpse, something unclean. Ranni, the Lunar Princess, is the spiritual successor to the Nox. Her destiny is the Age of Stars, which is essentially the victory of the Eternal Cities over the Erd Tree. When you choose Ranni's ending, you're fulfilling the dream of the Nox. You're bringing the chill night that they have been praying for. The irony, of course, is that Ranni leaves the world behind to go on a space voyage, leaving the lands between in a cold, dark, quiet state. But perhaps, for the Nox, that is paradise. No more blinding gold light, just the soothing velvet darkness of the void. One final detail that haunts the Eternal Cities is the giant seated skeleton you find in Nokron, the one seemingly presiding over the city. It is non-hostile because it is dead, but its scale is massive, far larger than giants. Some speculate this is the corpse of the formless mother, or some other outer god's avatar, but it's more likely a relic of the Titans, or the prior civilization the Nox displaced or descended from. It sits there, a silent witness to the futility of their rebellion. The Nox built a city around a corpse, forged a weapon from a corpse, and strived to create life from dead silver matter. They are a necromantic culture masquerading as a high society, and let's be honest, the snipers down here are the true horror. The ancestral followers with their guided missile arrows make exploring this beautiful zone a nightmare. It's a subtle reminder that the Nox and their neighbours have had a long time to practice their aim in the dark. They have been waiting for a visitor, and when you arrive shining with the grace of gold, you are the perfect target practice. They hate you not just because you are an intruder, but because you represent the sun that abandoned them. As we leave the glittering false night of Nokron, we carry with us the weight of their failure. The Finger Slayer blade sits in our inventory, a heavy, jagged promise of deicide. The Nox couldn't use it. They were crushed before they got the chance, but we are the tarnished. We have no such compunctions. We are the inheritors of their treason, ready to finish the job they started thousands of years ago. Leaving behind the cool, fluid silver of the eternal cities, we must now turn our eyes back to the light. But not the blinding, oppressive light of the Erdtree we know. We are looking for a different hue, a purer, more desperate shade. We are talking about unalloyed gold. In the grand, dysfunctional family drama that is the demigod pantheon, Miquella stands out. He is cursed with eternal childhood, trapped in the body of a boy, but he possesses an intellect that terrifies even the gods. While his siblings were busy waging war, conquering stars, or getting eaten by snakes, Miquella was doing something else entirely. He was conducting scientific research. He is the Oppenheimer of faith, the Tesla of theology, trying to engineer a way out of the cosmic game that has rigged the lives of everyone in the lands between. The core in-game fact here is simple, but devastating. The Golden Order cannot cure the Scarlet Rot. Miquella's twin sister Malenia was born cursed by an outer god of rot. She is essentially a living nuclear reactor of biological decay. Miquella, loving his sister, tried everything the Golden Order had to offer. He learned the incantations, he prayed to his father Radagon, he studied the fundamentalism of the Erdtree, and it failed. The item description of the Radagon's Rings of Light incantation contains a heartbreaking admission. And yet the young Miquella abandoned fundamentalism, for it could do nothing to treat Malenia's accursed rot. This was the beginning of unalloyed gold. This is a pivotal moment in history. Miquella realized that the Golden Order wasn't flawed just in practice, it was flawed in its very physics. It was alloyed, mixed, impure, tied to the whims of the greater will. To save his sister, he needed something that could block out the influence of the outer gods entirely. He created unalloyed gold. This isn't just a fancy jewelry term. In the metaphysical chemistry of Elden Ring, unalloyed gold is a substance capable of halting the meddling of cosmic entities. It is a spiritual Faraday cage. We see the ultimate proof of this technology in the unalloyed gold needle. This tiny, intricate item is one of the most powerful artifacts in the game. When completed, it can pause the rot eating away at Millicent, a fragment of Malenia, and more impressively it can be used in the heart of the storm, in Placido Sax's arena, to tame the frenzied flame. Think about the implications of that. The frenzied flame is a force of absolute chaos, capable of melting all existence back into the one great, and a small golden needle invented by a child can just turn it off. It suggests that Miquella had cracked the code. He figured out how to tell the outer gods to hang up the phone. But this brilliance comes with a shadowy undertone. The Haligtree, Miquella's attempt to grow a new Erdtree, is a sanctuary for the downtrodden. We find Albinaurics, Misbegotten, and other impure creatures seeking refuge there. It looks like a utopia, but look closer. The Haligtree is watered with blood, specifically Miquella's blood. He embedded himself in the roots in a cocoon, feeding the tree with his own cursed Empyrean essence to make it grow. It is a parasitic relationship reversed. The tree is eating the god. The visuals of the Haligtree are stunning, but the rot has set in. Since Miquella's abduction by Mog, the tree has begun to die. The safe haven is rotting from the inside out, filled with soldiers who explode into light and rot zombies who hug you to death. Here is the obscure lore tidbit that casts a darker shadow on the kind Miquella, the bewitching branch. This consumable item allows the player to charm enemies, turning them into temporary allies. The item description reads, "The Empyrean Miquella is loved by many people. Indeed, he has learned very well how to compel such affection." The word compel is doing a lot of heavy lifting there. It implies that the love people feel for Miquella might not be voluntary. It suggests a terrifying form of mind control. Is the loyalty of the Haligtree soldiers genuine? Or are they all under a massive passive spell cast by a god who weaponizes charisma? This feeds into the community debate regarding Miquella's true nature. For a long time, fans viewed him as the good demigod, the one who just wanted to heal his sister and give the outcasts a home. But the Griffith theory, referencing the charismatic but ruthless antagonist from Berserk, a major inspiration for FromSoftware, suggests Miquella is actually the most dangerous of them all. Malenia calls herself the Blade of Miquella. She fights for him. Mog became obsessed with him. The people of the Haligtree throw their lives away for him. The theory posits that Miquella's power isn't just wisdom, It is the power to rewrite the hearts of others. He doesn't conquer lands with armies, he conquers souls with love. In a world of monsters, the guy who can make you love him against your will is the one you should be most afraid of. We must also touch upon the alter ego, St. Trina. Throughout the game, we find items related to St. Trina: lilies, swords, torches, all inducing sleep. The Sword of St. Trina description says, St. Trina is an enigmatic figure. Some say she's a comely young girl, others are sure he's a boy. The only certainty is that their appearance was as sudden as their disappearance. The community has long connected the dots. St. Trina is Miquella. The sleep status effect is a close cousin to the dormancy Miquella sought in his cocoon. The dual identity fits the alchemical themes of the Rebis, the divine hermaphrodite, the perfect being possessing both male and female qualities. Miquella divesting himself of St. Trina, as explored in the expansions, or simply operating under a pseudonym allows him to influence the world through dreams while his body remains dormant. It's another layer of manipulation. He isn't just controlling the waking world, he's colonizing your sleep. Let's look at the failed nature of the Haligtree again. Why did it fail to become an Erdtree? Some say it's because Miquella was kidnapped before he could finish the gestation. Others argue that it failed because it wasn't connected to the Elden Ring, but there's a more tragic possibility. It failed because unalloyed gold is sterile. It repels the outer gods, yes, but in doing so, it cuts itself off from the vital energies that drive the universe. The Erdtree thrives because it is a conduit for the greater will. The Haligtree is a sealed system, it's a bunker, and bunkers eventually run out of air. Miquella's tragedy is the tragedy of isolationism. In trying to protect his sister and himself from the cosmic game, he created a beautiful golden cage that ultimately couldn't sustain life. The visual storytelling in Elphael, Brace of the Haligtree, is masterclass. You're descending a structure that is desperately holding up a rotting god. The clean white stone of the city contrasts with the gnarly fungal roots. The Cleanrot Knights found here are the saddest enemies in the game. They are loyal to millennia, fighting despite their own bodies slowly rotting away from the inside due to proximity to their mistress. They are the ultimate testament to Miquella's failure. He promised a cure, he promised a new order, and all he gave them was a beautiful place to die. There is also a fascinating connection between unalloyed gold and the eclipse. In Castle Sol, we find the ghost of a loyalist apologizing to Miquella. Lord Miquella, forgive me, the sun has not been swallowed. Our prayers were lacking. Miquella wanted to bring about an eclipse. Why? Because the eclipse is associated with the soulless demigods. It is believed that an eclipse could help restore Godwyn's soul or grant him a true death. Miquella wasn't just trying to save Malenia, he was trying to fix the Godwyn problem too. He was trying to solve the Deathblight crisis with solar mechanics. The failure of the eclipse ritual at Castle Sol is why Miquella eventually resorted to the Haligtree plan. It was Plan B, and when Plan B was interrupted by Mog, everything fell apart. The needle imagery is also evocative. A needle is a tool of precision. It stitches, it pierces, it injects. It is the opposite of a hammer or a sword. Miquella fights with surgery. When you use the needle in the game, it's a quiet, small action. No explosion, just a subtle shift in reality. It reinforces that Miquella operates on the micro level. He is editing the source code while everyone else is smashing the keyboard. Finally, we have to acknowledge the sheer audacity of Miquella's goal. He wanted to tell the outer gods, entities that are essentially Lovecraftian horrors the size of galaxies, to get off his lawn. And for a brief moment, with a piece of gold alloyed with nothing but his own genius, he succeeded. The unalloyed gold needle is the only object in the game that represents true freedom. Freedom from the greater will, from the frenzied flame, from the rot god. It is the only way to be just human in a world of monsters. But as with all things in Elden Ring, the price of that freedom was a sister left to rot, and a brother abducted into a dynasty of blood. The gold was pure, but the world it was forged in was simply too dirty to let it shine. If Miquella's Haligtree was the promised land, then the Albinaurics were the pilgrims who died crawling toward it. Leaving the high branches of the rotting sanctuary, we descend into the muddy, bloody reality of the lands between second-class citizens. The Albinaurics represent one of the grimmest philosophical questions posed by Elden Ring. In a world governed by a divine order, what happens to those who were never meant to exist? The Albinaurics are not born of the Erd Tree. They have no grace. They are homunculi, artificial life forms crafted by human hands, likely the sorcerers of Raya Lucaria or the Eternal City alchemists, using the substance of the Silver Tears. They are the androids of this high fantasy setting, and like all good sci-fi androids, they are tragic, soulful, and doomed to malfunction. The core in-game fact that defines their existence is the generational divide. We encounter two distinct types of Albinaurics, which the community has colloquially dubbed Generation 1 and Generation 2. The first generation are the ones who look human. They are the women riding wolves in the consecrated snowfield, or the old men crawling on the ground in Liurnia. They were created to be beautiful and graceful, but their creators made a mistake in the genetic code. The Albinauric pot item description and the dialogue from Albus reveal the curse. Their legs eventually fail them. It is a built-in obsolescence. As they age, their motor functions degrade, leaving them crippled. It's a cruel joke, created to look like the perfect humans, but denied the ability to walk the earth alongside them. Then there is the correction, Generation 2. These are the dumpling-headed, frog-like creatures we see cartwheeling around Liurnia and the sewers. The creators, realizing the first batch was too frail, swung the pendulum too far in the other direction. They made them sturdy. They gave them thick hides, squat bodies, and a complete lack of human aesthetic. They fixed the legs but broke the soul. These frogmen can't speak the way the first generation can. They just gurgle and scream. It's a horrifying look into the mindset of the sorcerers. Oh, the pretty ones break too easily? Fine, make them ugly and tough. Who cares? They're just tools. The obscure lore tidbit that ties them to the Nox is found in the Albinauric blood clot description. It explicitly states, Albinaurics are life forms made by human hands. Thus, many believe them to live impure lives, untouched by the Erd Tree's grace. But more importantly, their blood is silver. When you slash a Gen 2 Albinauric, the spray isn't red, it's a milky, greyish white. This connects them directly to the silver tears of the Eternal Cities. They are essentially solidified quicksilver. This explains why they are persecuted by the Golden Order. The Order is based on the flow of gold, golden grace, golden runes, golden leaves. The Albinaurics are running on a different operating system, entirely. They are silver beings in a golden world. They are fundamentally incompatible with the metaphysics of the ruling deity. This incompatibility leads to the brutal racism we see throughout the game. The Omen Killers, those Capra demon-looking guys with the dual cleavers, are not hunting omens in the village of the Albinaurics. They are hunting Albinaurics. Gideon Ofnir, the all-knowing, who honestly just seems to be the all-genocidal, orders the slaughter of the village to find a medallion half. The visual storytelling in the village of the Albinaurics is devastating. You walk through a town that has been put to the sword. Bodies are piled up. The few survivors are driven mad with grief. Albus, the Elder, has to use mimicry magic to hide inside a pot just to survive the purge. When he gives you the medallion, he is essentially handing you the last hope of his entire race. He is terrified, dying, and his legs are gone. It is a scene of absolute despair. But let's talk about the Wolfback Archers. The Gen 1 female Albinaurics found a kinship with the direwolves. This is significant because wolves are beasts, creatures of nature. The Albinaurics, rejected by civilized society, found family among the animals. Latenna, the Albinauric woman whose spirit ash we can summon, has a direwolf companion named Lobo. When we find her, Lobo has been killed. Her grief is palpable. She isn't mourning a pet, she's mourning a partner. This symbiotic relationship suggests that while the Golden Order rejects them, the natural world, the Crucible adjacent world, accepts them. They are closer to the beast than they are to the sorcerers who made them. There is a thriving community debate regarding the afterlife of an Albinauric. In Elden Ring, when a normal person dies, their soul returns to the Erd Tree to be recycled. It's the cycle of grace. But Albinaurics don't have grace, so where do they go? Do they just cease to exist? This existential dread is what drives them toward Miquella. Miquella's unalloyed gold promised a place where the logic of the Erd Tree didn't apply. He was building a heaven for the soulless. The birthing droplet item implies they were made from a primordial drop of dew, which sounds lovely until you realise it means they are essentially lab-grown test tube babies with no spiritual rights. The debate rages: can an artificial being gain a soul through action? Latenna travels with us, fights with us, and seeks to fulfill a promise to her sister. She exhibits more humanity than nearly any demigod we meet. It forces the player to question the definition of life in this setting. We also have to address the elephant in the room, or rather, the frog in the room. The Palace Approach Ledge Road site of Grace in Mogwyn Palace. We need to have a frank conversation about what happens there. This specific spot is home to dozens of sleeping Gen 2 Albinaurics. They are passive. They are sitting there, perhaps dreaming of a better life, guarding the entrance to their kidnapped lord's dynasty. And what do the players do? We go there with the sacred relic sword, the sword made from the body of the Elden Beast itself, and we cast Wave of Gold. We slaughter them by the thousands. Millions of Albinaurics have died on that hill to level up our vigor stats. It is the darkest meta joke in FromSoftware history. The lore tells us these creatures are oppressed, hunted, and treated as fodder for the strong. And then the game mechanics encourage us, the players, to oppress, hunt, and use them as fodder to become strong. We become the very villains the lore warns us about. Every time you see a rune farming guide on YouTube, it's a tutorial on how to commit an Albinauric massacre. The developers knew exactly what they were doing. They put the most pathetic high-run value enemies in a dense cluster right next to a checkpoint. They turned the tragedy of the Albinaurics into an efficiency spreadsheet. Let's look at the Ripple Blade and the Ripple Crescent Halberd. These are weapons wielded by the Albinaurics. The description says, "Weapon wielded by the young Albinaurics, lacking the intelligence of their brethren." This confirms the intellectual degradation of the second generation. But the weapon art? It uses arcane. Arcane is the stat of discovery, of item finding, but also of blood and the abnormal. It links them to the Formless Mother and the blood magics, which explains why Mog was able to recruit them so easily. Mog didn't care that they were artificial. He just needed warm bodies that bled. He offered them a purpose when the rest of the world offered them a sword. It's a tragic radicalization story. They joined the Blood Cult because the Blood Cult was the only club that didn't have a "No Homunculi Allowed" sign on the door. There is also the mystery of the Great Rune of the Unborn. Renala holds the amber egg containing this rune. The juvenile scholars in her boss fight are reborn again and again, crawling on the floor, frail and short-lived. They look suspiciously like Gen 1 Albinaurics. Is Renala using the same process? Is the amber egg the prototype technology for Albinauric creation? It implies that the sorcerers of the Academy were playing God long before they perfected the Silver Tears. They were trying to master rebirth, but all they managed to create were things that could barely crawl before fading away. The visual design of the Gen 2 Albinaurics deserves a nod. Their heads are enormous, their eyes are wide and vacant, and their mouths are perpetually slightly open. They look like sad, damp cartoons. But when they aggro, they do that terrifying cartwheel attack, spinning toward you with spikes protruding from their bodies. It's goofy, yes, but it's also biologically horrifying. They're inflating their bodies and turning themselves into living saw blades. It speaks to a biology that is malleable, unstable. They are made of soft metal, and they can twist their bones in ways that should snap a human in half. And we cannot forget the Albinauric shield. It depicts a drop of dew. This is their symbol. Not a tree, not a beast, but a single, lonely drop of liquid. It represents their origin, the Silver Tear and their fragility. A drop of dew evaporates in the sun, and that is the fate of the Albinaurics. They are drying up in the harsh light of the Golden Order. As we leave the massacre at the village and the blood-soaked hill of Mogwyn Palace, we are left with the uneasy feeling that the monsters in this game are often just victims of bad manufacturing and worse politics. The Albinaurics didn't ask to be made. They certainly didn't ask to be made without legs or to be turned into frogs. They just wanted to find a quiet place to sleep. But in the lands between, if you don't have a demigod's rune or a tarnished's ambition, you don't get to sleep. You just get farmed. We climb now, rising from the tragic muck of the Albinauric villages and the blood-soaked banks of the Mogwyn dynasty, ascending the great lift to the very heart of the world, Leyndell, the royal capital. It is a city of blinding majesty, a sprawling metropolis of white stone and golden shingles buried under layers of ash and dragon corpses. But amidst the grand architecture and the bubble-blowing envoys, there stands a silent testament to the greatest lie ever told in the lands between. We are heading to the Erdtree Sanctuary to stand before a statue that holds the key to the entire mythos. The core in-game fact here is the solution to the riddle that stumps the Gold Mask. Throughout the game, we are told that Queen Marika the Eternal is the god of this age, and Radagon is her consort, the second Elden Lord. They are presented as two distinct entities, a queen and a king, a wife and a husband. But in the capital, there is a developer message on the ground, one of the few non-player messages that reads, "Regression alone reveals secrets." This is a prompt to use the Law of Regression incantation. Now, let's be honest, most of you playing Unga Bunga Strength builds probably stared at this statue for 10 minutes, hit it with a hammer, and then left. But for the Intelligence Faith hybrids, casting this specific spell in front of the statue triggers a visual illusion to fade. The statue of Marika, with her flowing hair and feminine frame, dissolves. In its place stands Radagon, stoic, cross-hatched, and masculine. The floating message changes to a simple, earth-shattering sentence. Radagon is Marika. This is the Luke, I am your father moment of Elden Ring. It fundamentally recontextualizes every event in the game's history. The war between the Carians and the Golden Order? That was Marika fighting herself. The marriage between Radagon and Rennala? That was Marika marrying the enemy. The sudden abandonment of Rennala so Radagon could return to the capital to marry Marika. That was Marika realizing she needed to be in two places at once, or perhaps reintegrating her other half. It reveals that the ruling deity of the lands between is a fractured being, a dual entity occupying one body, shifting between male and female, golden and red. But this secret wasn't just a fun piece of trivia for the player, it was a closely guarded state secret that people died for. This brings us to the obscure lore tidbit involving the Preceptors. You might remember Preceptor Seluvis, the nasty sorcerer with the big hat, or Preceptor Miriam, the teleporting nuisance in the Carian study hall. The mask of confidence worn by these preceptors tells a chilling story. The item description reads, "Mask with the mouth sewn shut with gold thread. When Radagon married Rennala, he ordered the Carian magic preceptors to don these masks, to make it clear that all of their matters were to be kept strictly private." Why sew their mouths shut? Because, they knew, Radagon spent years living with Rennala. It is impossible to share a life, a bed, and a battlefield with someone without them noticing that you occasionally turn into a blonde woman who is also the god of the world. The preceptors likely saw the transformation. They saw the cracks in the facade. So, Radagon, in his Golden Order authoritarianism, literally silenced them. He bound their mouths with gold thread, a symbol of his order, ensuring that the secret of his duality would never leave the Academy. It paints Radagon not just as a dutiful soldier, but as a paranoid warden of his own identity. The revelation also explains the physical design of the statue itself. If you look closely at the Marika version, she is posed with her arms out, welcoming fluid. When it shifts to Radagon, he is doing the Golden Order totality pose, the T-pose. This grid-like rigid stance represents the fundamentalism he championed. Marika is grace, Radagon is math. Marika is the chaotic flow of life. Radagon is the rigid lattice of logic. The statue captures the internal war between these two concepts. This leads to the prevailing fan theory regarding the shattering. We know Marika shattered the Elden Ring. We know Radagon tried to repair it. The opening cinematic shows them sharing the same body, switching back and forth with each hammer blow. One strikes to break, the body shifts, and the other strikes to fix. It is an image of absolute schizophrenia on a cosmic scale. The theory posits that the shattering wasn't just a political move, it was a result of this internal conflict reaching a boiling point. Marika wanted to end the eternal struggle, to break the cage of the greater will. Radagon, the loyal hound of the Golden Order, wanted to maintain it. Some lore hunters go deeper, referencing the alchemical rebis. In alchemy, the rebis, from the Latin res bina, meaning double matter, is the end product of the great work, a reconciliation of spirit and matter, often depicted as a two-headed figure, half male and half female, a divine hermaphrodite. The rebus is supposed to be perfect, but in Elden Ring the rebus is flawed. Radagon and Marika are not in harmony, they are in opposition. Instead of a perfect union, they are a house divided against itself. This is why the Golden Order is crumbling. The god at the centre of it is having a divorce inside their own ribcage. The red hair of Radagon is another layer of this puzzle. The giant's red braid whip tells us, every giant is red of hair, and Radagon was said to have despised his own red locks. Perhaps that was a curse of their kind. The theory here is that Radagon might have been cursed by the fire giants during Marika's war against them. Did the giants curse Marika to bear a red-haired aspect that would eventually act as a shackle? Or is Radagon's red hair a sign that he is connected to the Crucible and the primal life forces that Marika tried to suppress? He hates his hair because it reminds him of the chaos he's trying to calculate out of existence. Consider the visual storytelling of the thorns blocking the Erd Tree. When we first arrive, we are barred entry by an impenetrable wall of thorns. The symbol on the thorns is Radagon's crosshatch seal. Marika wants us to enter. She guides us with grace. She put the weapons to kill her in the hands of the blacksmith. She wants a tarnish to come in and end her misery. But Radagon is holding the door shut. He is the one blocking the player. He is the final firewall of the greater will, frantically trying to keep the system running, while his other half tries to crash the server. The law of regression incantation itself offers a philosophical clue. The description says, regression is the pull of meaning, that all things yearn eternally to converge. Radagon's fundamentalism is about pulling things together, making them one, removing the differences. He wanted to merge with Marika to complete the totality, but in doing so, he trapped them both. The secret of the statue is that order is just a fancy word for stagnation. By trying to force everything into one perfect shape, Radagon halted the natural flow of life. When we finally enter the Erd Tree and fight the final boss, notice the transition. We see Marika hanging from the rune arc, crucified, blonde hair turning to stone. She falls, and as she hits the water, the hair turns red. The body stands up, it grabs the hammer. It is Radagon. There is no dialogue, no, who are you? Just the silent mechanical violence of a god who has lost the ability to distinguish between fixing a ring and smashing a skull. The tragedy of the statue in Leyndell is that it captures the moment before the break. It captures the secret that could have saved the world if anyone had understood it sooner. The gods aren't fighting us. They are fighting themselves, and we are just the collateral damage in their domestic dispute. Goldmask's reaction to this revelation is profound. He doesn't speak, but his finger twitches. He creates the mending rune of perfect order. He realizes the gods are fickle, they are emotional, they are messy. His solution? Remove the gods from the equation entirely. If Radagon and Marika can't get along, then the order needs to be run by a neutral system. The secret of the statue radicalized the Gold Mask. It proved to him that personality is a flaw in divinity. So, the next time you run past that statue on your way to fight Godfrey, take a second to appreciate the artistry. It's not just a piece of set dressing, it is a snapshot of a divine identity crisis frozen in stone. It is a monument to the fact that even with all the power in the universe, you can still be your own worst enemy. From the golden, heated internal conflict of the capital, we drift north and west into the cool, mist-shrouded wetlands of Liurnia. If Leyndell is the burning sun of the lands between, Liurnia is its cool, reflective moon. And sitting high upon the limestone cliffs, in a sub-region known appropriately as the Three Sisters, resides the architect of the shattering itself. We are speaking, of course, of Lunar Princess Ranni, but tonight we aren't looking at the demigod plotter who stole a fragment of death. We are looking at the face she chose to wear. We are looking at the doll. The core in-game fact is immediately visually apparent, yet often overlooked in its implications. The Ranni we meet is not Ranni. The four-armed, blue-skinned, rope-jointed woman sitting in the tower is a puppet. We know from the lore that Ranni was an Empyrean, a child of Radagon and Rennala. Given her siblings, Radan and Ricard, and her father, the biological Ranni, would have been tall, imposing, and crucially, she would have had red hair. We actually see her charred original corpse at the top of the Divine Tower of Liurnia. It is a large, emaciated body with tufts of red hair clinging to the scalp. So, when Ranni slew her own flesh to escape the control of the greater will, she needed a new vessel for her soul. She didn't choose to look like a generic human, nor did she model herself after her mother, the Full Moon Queen. She modelled her new body after an old secret mentor, the Snowy Crone. This brings us to the obscure lore tidbit hidden in the description of the Snow Witch set. You find this set in Renna's Rise, one of the 3 towers, implying this was where the mentor lived, or where Ranni kept her memory alive. The hat's description reads, "Witch's pointed hat, frigid and frozen through, once worn by the Snowy Crone who the young Ranni encountered deep in the woods. She was a witch of forbidden magic, and asserted that a fear of the dark moon was more important than even the most studious sorcery." This creates a beautiful, intimate backstory for the demigod. While she was being groomed by the Two Fingers to succeed Marika, and while she was being taught the glintstone orthodoxy of the academy, young Ranni was sneaking out into the woods. She found an outcast, an old crone who practiced cold sorcery, a discipline distinct from the Carians. The Carians study the stars and the full moon, Renala's domain. The crone study the dark moon and the chill of the void. Ranni's doll body is a tribute to this woman. The blue skin, the doll joints, the white robes. This is a cosplay of the only person who taught Ranni that it was okay to be afraid. The Golden Order teaches certainty. The crone taught fear. And in that fear, Ranni found the freedom to rebel. The 4 arms aspect of the doll is a frequent topic of community debate. Why 4? Some practical thinkers suggest it's simply for casting speed. More hands, more somatic components, more magic. Others point to the Wraiths and the Revenants, creatures with multiple limbs that seem connected to the spirit world. But there is a more poetic theory. Ranni is a spirit inhabiting an object. The doll is a complex mechanism. Perhaps the Snowy Crone herself wasn't human. Was she a construct? Or does the 4-armed design reference an ancient lost race? We see the marionette soldiers in the academy with 4 arms, malfunctioning and twitching. It implies that 4-armed puppet is a standard design in Liurnian artificing. Ranni took a weapon of war, a marionette, and customized it with the face of her beloved teacher. It's a blending of military hardware and sentimental memory. There is a fascinating, almost ghostly detail that many players miss during Ranni's dialogue. If you look closely at her face while she speaks, especially in the dark of her tower, you will see a faint spectral face overlapping the doll's face. It acts like a double exposure. This is Ranni's actual soul projecting outward. The ghost face aligns perfectly with the doll's right eye, the one that is open. The doll's left eye is shut, mirroring the icon of the beast eye or the concept of blinding oneself to the greater will. But the ghost face? It looks different. It has a narrower jaw, a different nose. It is the last lingering image of the red-haired princess she used to be, haunting the shell of the blue witch she became. Let's dig into the Renna alias. When we first meet Ranni at the Church of Elay, she introduces herself as Renna. Later she drops the act. But the tower where we find the Snow Witch set is called Renna's Rise. The community generally accepts that Renna was the name of the Snowy Crone. By taking her name, Ranni was adopting a new identity, effectively divorcing herself from the lineage of Radagon. It's the ultimate I'm not my father's daughter move. She essentially adopted herself into the lineage of a random witch in the woods. It highlights the found family theme that runs quietly through the game. Ranni rejects her biological purpose, Empyrean, and chooses her own spiritual mother. The nature of the magic the crone taught, cold sorcery, is significant. In Elden Ring, status effects tell stories. Frostbite slows stamina recovery and lowers damage absorption. It makes you brittle. It is the entropy of the universe. While the Erd Tree is about eternal, bountiful life, cold is about the slow, quiet heat death of the universe. Ranni's dark moon is not a source of light. It is a cold, heavy rock in the sky. The crone taught Ranni to fear it. This fear is crucial. The Academy sorcerers are arrogant. They think they can control the stars. The primeval sorcerers, like Azura and Lusat, looked into the void and went mad because they didn't respect it. Ranni looked into the dark and kept her sanity because the crone taught her respect. She approaches the void with caution, which is why she is the only sorcerer demigod who seems to have her head on straight. There is a prevalent fan theory connecting the Snowy Crone to the Zamor. The Zamor Knights are tall, lanky, ancient warriors from the mountaintops of the giants who wield ice magic. They have a similar slender build to the doll. Was the Snowy Crone a Zamor outcast? It would explain the height and the mastery of ice. If true, it adds another layer of political intrigue. The Zamor were enemies of the fire giants. Radagon's bane theoretically. By aligning with a Zamor figure, Ranni is further distancing herself from the fire elements of her father's curse. We must also consider the visual storytelling of the miniature Ranni doll. When we find this item in the Ainsel River, it is tiny, portable, and cold. Ranni has transferred her soul from the big doll to the small doll to hide. The dialogue we get when we talk to it, "I cannot believe you. To think I'd be shamed so," reveals a crack in her icy demeanour. She is embarrassed. The great schemer, the Godslayer, is reduced to a toy in the Tarnished's pocket. It humanises her. It reminds us that for all her cosmic ambition, she is still a person who gets annoyed when someone spots her in her travel mode. But it also reinforces the doll motif. To Ranni, the body is nothing more than a vehicle. Large, small, porcelain, flesh. It doesn't matter. Only the mind, the dark moon of her consciousness, is real. The connections to the eternal cities, which we discussed in Section 4, are solidified here. The Fingerslayer blade, the weapon of the Nox, is what Ranni needs. Why? Because the Nox and the Snowy Crone likely shared a philosophy. The stars are the true masters, not the greater will. The Snowy Crone might have been a descendant of the Nox who lived on the surface, a keeper of the old ways. By guiding Ranni, she was planting the seeds of the Nox's revenge. The Age of Stars ending is effectively the victory of the Snowy Crone's teachings. It is the triumph of the cool dark night over the burning blinding day. Furthermore, look at the environment of the Three Sisters. The area is protected by a dragon Adula. But Adula is not a normal dragon. She wields Adula's Moonblade, a cold sorcery spell. The item description says, Adula swore a knightly oath to Ranni after being defeated by her. This mirrors the relationship between a knight and a princess, but twisted. Ranni defeated the dragon not with strength, but with the crone's magic. Even the mighty dragons bow to the chill of the dark moon. It establishes that the magic Ranni learned in the woods is potent enough to subjugate the most powerful, biological creatures in history. The aesthetic of the doll also speaks to the concept of artificiality that permeates Liurnia. We have the Albinaurics, artificial life, the marionettes, artificial soldiers, and the cuckoo knights, who use false glintstone. Ranni is the apex of this. She is the perfect artificial being. She is the success story that the Nox and the Academy failed to achieve. She's a construct that holds the soul of a god. But unlike the Albinaurics, who are deemed impure, Ranni forces the world to acknowledge her divinity. She proves that the vessel doesn't make the god. The will does. Let's not forget the sheer creepiness of Seluvis's basement. Just down the hill from Ranni's tower, her servant Seluvis keeps a dungeon full of catatonic puppets. One of them is a fastidious noble, another is a jar-right. Seluvis turns people into dolls. Ranni is a doll who used to be a person. The contrast is sharp. Seluvis removes agency to create toys. Ranni became a toy to gain agency. It creates a disturbing dynamic in her court. Does she know what Seluvis does? Of course she does. She tolerates him because he is useful, but the irony is palpable. She is the queen of dolls, surrounded by a man who treats doll-making as a fetishistic hobby, rather than a path to liberation. Finally, consider the hands. The doll's hands are often folded in her lap or gesturing elegantly. But in the boss fight against Rennala, which is an illusion projected by Ranni, the phantom Ranni speaks with fierce protectiveness. Mother's rich slumber shall not be disturbed by thee. The Snowy Crone taught Ranni to protect what matters. Ranni discarded her own flesh, her own status, and her own brother, Godwyn, but she stepped in to save her mother's dignity. It suggests that the Crone taught her that while the Order is disposable, loyalty to your teachers and your blood, the maternal side at least, is paramount. As we leave Ranni's rise staring up at the two moons in the sky, we have to appreciate the irony. The most human-looking characters in the game are often monsters, and the character who looks like a cracked porcelain antique from a haunted estate sale is the one offering us a future of freedom. She sits there in the dark, 4 hands resting on her knees, waiting for a lord who isn't afraid of the cold. And somewhere, in the memory of the code, the Snowy Crone is smiling. Her student finally did it. She turned off the sun. If Ranni's cold, doll-like existence represents the allure of the stars, then what we find lurking in the craters and caverns of the lands between represents the biting reality of what actually lives up there. We leave the quiet, philosophical chill of the Three Sisters and descend into the geological trauma of the Earth. In our world, stars are distant balls of burning gas, romantic and untouchable. In Elden Ring, stars are not celestial bodies, they're biological entities. They are apex predators made of rock, gravity and stardust, and they are very, very hungry. We are talking about the Astel life cycle, a terrifying evolutionary line that suggests the cosmos is not empty, but teeming with things that view the lands between as a nesting ground. The core in-game fact that binds this horror story together is the biological progression from the falling star beast to the malformed star, and finally to Astel. To the unobservant eye, these might look like three distinct enemy types, but they are clearly stages of a single metamorphosis. It is the life cycle of a cosmic antlion. The falling star beast, which we fight in craters like the one in Altus Plateau or on Met Gelmir, is the lava. It is encased in heavy, rock-like armour. It has no wings. It scuttles, charges and thrashes with the desperate, erratic energy of a baby insect trying to burrow. Its body is essentially a meteorite that grew legs. When it crashes into the lands, it isn't just an impact, it's a birth. Then we have the malformed star. You usually find these hanging upside down in underground caverns, like the Ainsel River or the path to the deep-root depths. They're immobile, suspended by their tails or legs, raining down gravity magic on anything that moves. This is the pupal stage. They have shed the heavy rock armour of the falling star beast to reveal the softer, exposed cosmic flesh underneath, but they haven't yet developed the strength to fly. They are incubating. The fact that they are found underground suggests that after the lava crashes, it burrows deep into the earth to find a safe, dark place to cocoon itself. Finally, the chrysalis cracks, and we get Astel, natural born of the void. This is the adult form. The wings have unfurled, beautiful nebular wings that look like slices of a galaxy. The pincers are fully formed. It floats with an eerie grace, mastering the gravity that once bound it to the earth. The nomenclature natural born is significant. In a world obsessed with grafting, Erdtree burials and artificial Albinaurics, Astel is natural. It wasn't made by a demigod or a sorcerer, it just is. It is a pure product of the void, an invasive species that arrived without an invitation. The obscure lore tidbit that confirms this biological link is found in the description of the Bastard Star's weapon. This flail is made from the debris of these creatures. The description reads, "Flail which strikes with the power of a nebula, formed of the same, many-coloured star debris that comprised the malformed star." It explicitly links the material composition of the malformed star to the nebular power of Astel. Furthermore, the falling star beast jaw weapon description notes that the beast is a star that fell to the lands between. The game is shouting at us that these aren't magical constructs. They are animals. They have jaws, mandibles, and biological imperatives. They are essentially space cicadas that hibernate for eons before waking up to laser beam a civilization into dust. But the most disturbing aspect of Astel, and the subject of intense community debate, is the face. Have you ever looked closely at Astel's face? It isn't an insect head. It is a cracked, human-like skull. It has eye sockets, one of which glows, a nose bridge, and human teeth. Why does a creature from the void, a creature that supposedly evolved light years away from humanity, have a human skull for a face? There are two main theories. The first is mimicry. Much like certain caterpillars on Earth have patterns that look like snakes to scare off predators, perhaps Astel evolved a face that mimics the dominant life form of the planet it invades. It wears the face of its prey to induce psychological terror. The second, darker theory is consumption. The falling star beasts are often found near mines or graveyards. We know stars consume life energy. Perhaps the skull isn't a mimicry. Perhaps it is a result of what it eats. Did Astel absorb so much human DNA or soul energy during its larval stage that it began to manifest human traits? This aligns with the Graven Mass school of sorcery, where sorcerers are merged into a ball of faces. The cosmos in Elden Ring seems to have a habit of aggregating life into singular, terrifying forms. Astel might be a flying graveyard, a collection of souls compacted into the shape of a dragonfly. This biological reality recontextualizes the feat of General Radagon. We are told Radagon conquered the stars and held them in stasis. For a long time, players assumed this meant he stopped the concept of fate or astrology. But knowing what we know about Astel, Radagon wasn't just stopping a horoscope. He was holding back an invasion fleet. The stars he halted were these beasts. He was using his gravity magic to keep the larvae in orbit, preventing them from making landfall. When we kill Radagon, the stars resume their motion, and immediately a massive star crashes into Limgrave. That crater isn't just a hole, it's a delivery system. Somewhere in that hole, a new falling star beast is waking up, ready to start the cycle all over again. We must also talk about the destruction of the Eternal City. The remembrance of the Natural Born tells us that Astel took away the sky of the Eternal City. This implies that the Great Hollow, the area where we find the nameless Eternal City, was created by an Astel impact. The creature was a biological weapon. Did the Greater Will throw an Astel at the Nox like a divine hand grenade? It fits the timeline. The Nox rebelled, and in response the Cosmos sent an exterminator. The Astel we fight in the Grand Cloister is likely the very same entity that levelled the city eons ago, now resting in the ruins of its own making. It destroyed a civilization and then decided to take a nap in the wreckage. The gravity magic used by these creatures is unique. It is purple, crackling with magnetic energy. This connects them to the Alabaster and Onyx Lords. These tall, stone-skinned humanoids are said to have risen to life when a meteor struck. Are the Lords the parasites that ride the falling star beasts? Or are they the keepers, the shepherds of these cosmic herds? The Alabaster Lord's sword describes them as a race of ancients with skin of stone. They taught Radagon gravity magic. It is a delicious irony. Radagon learned the magic of the stars from the Star People, only to use that magic to put the stars in a headlock. He turned their own weapon against them. The visual design of the Astel grab attack is pure nightmare fuel. The creature teleports, reappearing above you and grabs you in its multiple hands. Then it opens its mandibles and bites down. The crunching sound is visceral, but if you survive, you notice you aren't just bitten, you're chewed. It reinforces the animalistic nature of the enemy. It doesn't hate you. It isn't evil. It is just feeding. To an Astel, a tarnished is just a crunchy protein bar filled with runes. Then there is the Wing of Astel curved sword. Its heavy attack releases a cloud of purple mist that explodes. This mist is described as dark matter. We are wielding the literal void. The text says the wings are proof of the Natural Born's wonder. The game seems to have a grudging respect for these monsters. They are beautiful in their own alien way. The colours of their wings, blues, purples, pinks, are the same colours we see in the primeval current of sorcery. It suggests that the magic sorcerer's channel is just the waste radiation of these biological entities. When Azur and Lusat looked into the primeval current, maybe they didn't see a formula. Maybe they saw a billion compound eyes staring back. We should also mention Astel, Stars of Darkness. This is a second Astel found in the consecrated snowfield inside the yellow Annex tunnel. The existence of a second one proves that the Natural Born wasn't a unique boss. It is a species. There are more of them. If there are two, there are likely 20 or 200. How many are sleeping deep underground, wrapped in their cocoons, waiting for the right vibration to wake them up? The map of the lands between is essentially a thin crust of earth covering a hive of starbugs. The location of the main Astel fight, past the Lake of Rot, is also telling. You have to travel through the absolute worst filth in the world to reach the clean, cold void. The Grand Cloister, where the kindred of Rot, the pest enemies, worship, leads directly to Astel. Do the pests worship the Rot, or do they worship the creature beyond it? The pests look like centipedes. Astel looks like an antlion. Is there a phylogenetic relationship? Are the pests the failed terrestrial cousins of the cosmic Astels? The game leaves this vague, but the architectural line from the Rock Goddess to the Void King is a straight one. So when you look up at the sky in Elden Ring, don't think of it as a canvas of destiny. Think of it as a swarm. Every twinkle is a carapace catching the light. Every shooting star is an egg being laid. The silence of the night sky isn't peace. It's the holding of breath before the plunge. And down here, in the dirt, we are just waiting for the next hungry mouth to break the atmosphere. From the cosmic dread of the void and the alien biology of the stars, we crash back down to the soil. We leave the realm of magic and monsters to talk about something far more human and far more painful: exile. The story of Elden Ring is, at its heart, the story of the tarnished. That's us. But before we were the silent protagonists rolling through poison swamps, we were an army. We were the soldiers of the Long March. To understand our place in this world, we have to look back at the moment the very first Tarnished was created and the brutal odyssey that followed. We have to look at Godfrey, the first Elden Lord, and the day the light went out in his eyes. The core in-game fact is a piece of history that defines the entire premise of the game. The Tarnished were not banished because they failed. They were banished because they won. Godfrey, originally the warrior chieftain Huara Lu, was Marika's instrument of conquest. He led the war against the giants, he stormed the Stormlord, he pacified the continent. But the moment his last enemy fell, the moment his axe had nothing left to cleave, Marika took his grace away. It wasn't a punishment for a crime, it was a retirement package from hell. The glow of gold left his eyes, and he became the first Tarnished. Along with his kin and his warriors, he was hounded out of the lands between. This exodus is known as the Long March. Imagine the psychological shock. You are the chosen people. You are bathed in the warm, euphoric radiation of the Erd Tree. You are blessed with near immortality and divine purpose. And then, snap, it's gone. The withdrawal must have been agonizing. The lore describes the Tarnished as having dead eyes. Without grace, the world probably looked greyer, colder, sharper. They were cast out into the fog, the lands outside the map, the Badlands. We often focus on the lands between, but the lore implies a vast world outside of it, a world without Erd trees, without respawn mechanics, a world where death is permanent and life is nasty, brutish and short. This brings us to the obscure lore tidbit hidden in the spoken echoes of Queen Marika. If you rest at the Third Church of Marika and choose to listen to Melina recite the Queen's words, you hear the specific orders given for the Long March. My lord and thy warriors, I divest you of your grace. With thine eyes dimmed, you will be driven from the lands between. You will wage war in a land afar where you will live and die. Note the phrasing, wage war in a land afar. They weren't sent away to farm, they were sent away to fight. Marika essentially deployed her own husband and his army into a meat grinder outside her own borders. She commanded them to die. This recontextualizes the opening cinematic of the game. When the narrator shouts, "The fallen leaves tell a story," and we see the montage of characters, we are seeing their deaths. Look closely at that intro again. We see Huara Lu, chieftain of the Badlands, hung up on a tree pierced by multiple swords and arrows, blood dripping from his mouth. He died in battle. We see Gideon Ofnir in a coffin, ears covered. He died. We see the Dung Eater hanging from the gallows by a rope. He was executed. We see Goldmask lying dead on the floor. The Long March wasn't just a walk, it was a slaughter. Every single Tarnished that returns to the lands between is a walking corpse that has been resurrected. We are an army of zombies, called back from our graves in the Badlands because the demigods failed to do their jobs. There is a massive fan theory, almost a certainty at this point, regarding Marika's true intention here. Why send away her greatest warrior? The theory posits that Marika knew the Golden Order was a trap. She knew that the Erd Tree, for all its blessings, made people soft. It made them stagnant. If you live in a world where you never die and the food grows on trees, you lose your edge. You lose the struggle. Marika needed a weapon that could kill a god, specifically the Elden Beast. But a weapon forged in the comfort of the Erd Tree would never be sharp enough. So she utilised the Long March as a training arc. She sent Godfrey and his kin into the harsh, godless world outside to grow strong in the face of death. This is the ultimate long con. Marika banished us so we would suffer. She wanted us to experience mortality, fear and desperation. She wanted us to level up in the real world so that when the time was right she could call us back, hardened and ruthless to shatter the cage of the greater will. The Tarnished are not rejected scraps. We are the special forces who went through Hell Week for 1,000 years. It adds a layer of twisted maternal affection to Marika. She loves us, so she destroyed our lives to make us better killers. The character of Nephili Lu serves as a living bridge to this history. She's a warrior of the Badlands. Her skin is weathered, her voice is rough, and she speaks of the storms and the hawks. She's likely a direct descendant of Godfrey, Huara Lu, or a member of his clan. Her dialogue reveals the culture of the Badlands. It is a place of honour, strength and simplicity. I am of the wasteland. I know not of courtly manners. While the lands between descended into the decadent magical madness of the Shattering War, the descendants of the Long March kept it real. They kept the warrior archetype alive while the demigods were busy playing wizard and snake cultist. This is why Nephili is one of the few characters who feels grounded. She has the blood of the exile in her veins. We must also consider the Church of the Pilgrimage on the Weeping Peninsula. This is likely where the march began. At the northern tip of the peninsula there is a church looking out over the water towards a distant land. The statue of Marika there looks almost sorrowful. Did she watch them leave? Did she stand on the cliffs of Limgrave and watch the ships carry her, husband, away? The emotional weight of that separation is heavy. Godfrey, the man who conquered a continent for her, took his banishment without a word of complaint. He became Waraloo again, embracing the savage warrior within, because that is what his queen needed him to be. His loyalty is terrifying. He didn't just die for her, he lived in exile for her. The rusted anchor weapon adds a touch of environmental storytelling to the Exodus. Its description reads, "While the Tarnished left the lands between with their lord, one boat remained behind." One boat. Just one. That implies a massive fleet left. It implies a Dunkirk-style evacuation of the warrior caste. The sheer scale of the Long March is often underestimated. It wasn't just a few guys, it was an entire generation of heroes leaving a vacuum behind. And who filled that vacuum? The soft, the schemers, and the demigods who would eventually tear the world apart. The departure of the Tarnished marked the beginning of the decline of the Golden Order. The strength of the realm walked out the door. Let's talk about the grace that returns. When we start the game, we see a tiny spark of light. That is grace. But what is it? In the context of the Long March, grace is a leash. Marika took it off to let the dogs run wild, and she put it back on to yank them home. The guidance of grace we follow is essentially Marika pointing her finger and saying, "Go kill that thing!" But notice that Godfrey's grace points to us. In his final cutscene, the light leads him to the player. To him, we are the boss, we are the obstacle. The guidance is not uniform. It pits Tarnished against Tarnished. This supports the idea that the Long March was a Darwinian selection process. Only the strongest Tarnished gets to become Elden Lord. Marika doesn't care which one of us wins, as long as the winner is the absolute apex predator. The hero's rune items give us a glimpse into the ancestors who died on the march. There were once heroes who walked the battlefield, unabashedly communicating with the avatars of the Erd Tree, before the Long March. They speak of a time when the connection was direct. The tragedy of the Tarnished is that we are orphans of a god who only calls us when she needs the house cleaned. We are the janitors of the apocalypse. There is a subtle connection to the Kaiden Sellswoods as well. These mercenaries from the north, possibly outside the lands between, settled in Limgrave. Their armour description mentions they are from a winter-honed people. Are they the remnants of the tribes that the Tarnished fought against in the Badlands? Or are they descendants of Tarnished who didn't make it back to the Erdtree and just settled for a paycheck? The world outside is bleeding back in. And what of the Round Table Hold? This stronghold exists outside of time, a gathering place for the Tarnished. It is a Valhalla for the exiles. But look at the state of it. It is burning. The two fingers, they are decrepit. It feels like a waiting room for the dead. The Long March didn't end when we woke up in the Chapel of Anticipation. The game is the final leg of the march. We are still marching. We are marching through the ruins of the home we were kicked out of, trying to reclaim a throne that might not even be worth sitting on. The brutality of the Badlands is best exemplified by the Dung Eater's armour. The Omen set. He cut the horns off Omen and stuck them to his armour. This implies that Omen exist outside the lands between, or he hunted them before he left. But the sheer rusty, jagged, utilitarian nature of the starting class's gear tells the story. The Vagabond Knight has armour that is battered and modified. The hero class is half naked. The samurai comes from the Land of Reeds, a place clearly distinct from the lands between, engaged in a civil war soaked in blood. The Long March connected the lands between to a wider geopolitics of suffering. We brought the world's trauma back with us. Finally, we must acknowledge the moment Godfrey returns. He doesn't come back as a conqueror. He comes back as a father holding his dead son, Morgott. The first thing he does after his 1,000-year exile is mourn the child he was forced to abandon. The Long March took everything from him: his grace, his crown, his wife, and the chance to see his children grow up. When he fights us, he isn't fighting for power, he is fighting for closure. He sheds the armour, the lion Serosh, who acted as a limiter on his rage, and fights us as a man. Huaralu, warrior. No magic, no golden beams, just hands, feet, and a suplex that reminds you that while you were playing with swords, he was wrestling bears in the wasteland. The Long March was the crucible that forged the player character. We are not the heroes of prophecy. We are the survivors of a death march. We are the ones who died in a ditch in the Badlands, heard the call, and crawled out of the dirt because we were too stubborn to stay dead. And that, fellow lawmasters, is why a tarnished of no renown can kill a god. Because we have already survived a world without one. If the Long March was a tragedy of open spaces and exile, the fate of the Great Caravan is a tragedy of enclosed spaces and entombment. We leave the dusty Badlands and return to the capital, but we are not going to the throne room. We're going to the sewers. Specifically, we're diving deep into the subterranean shunning grounds, past the gargoyles, past the lobsters that snipe you with water jets, and down a hidden jumping puzzle that has claimed more lives than millennia's waterfowl dance. We are heading to the Cathedral of the Forsaken, a place that stands as the absolute moral nadir of the Golden Order. The core in-game fact here is visually inescapable once you find the secret area behind the altar. The nomadic merchants, the Santa Claus-looking fellows we buy arrows and crafting kits from, are the survivors of a genocide. When we descend into the proscription area, we don't find a dungeon populated by monsters. We find a mass grave, but it's not a quiet grave. It is a pit filled with thousands of bodies of the merchant clan, piled atop one another, frozen in varied states of agony. And the horror is that not all of them are dead. Some are still moving. Some are playing that haunting, slow melody on their instruments, filling the cavern with a dirge for their own damned souls. This is the resting place of the Great Caravan. According to the lore, the merchants were once a thriving, wandering tribe. They were rounded up by the Golden Order, accused of heresy, and thrown into this pit to be buried alive. The sheer logistics of this atrocity are staggering. The Golden Order didn't just kill them, they paved over them. They built a city on top of their screaming bodies. The architecture of the lower levels is literally supported by the calcified corpses of these people. It is a grim reminder that the shining gold of Lendel is built on a foundation of bones. But why? What crime could a bunch of donkey-riding peddlers commit to warrant such a punishment? This brings us to the obscure lore tidbit involving Shabriri. The Howl of Shabriri incantation states, "It is said that the sickness of the flame of frenzy began with Shabriri, the most reviled man in all history." But where does he fit in with the merchants? The connection is found in the nomadic merchant's chapeau, and the cut dialogue from Cully's questline, which, while technically cut, provides the context for the environmental storytelling we see. The merchants were accused of worshipping the Three Fingers and the Frenzied Flame. However, the tragedy is that the accusation was a lie. They didn't worship the Frenzied Flame before they were buried. Shabriri, likely the slanderer mentioned in various item descriptions, framed them. He whispered lies into the ears of the Golden Order's leadership, convincing them that the caravan was a threat. The Order, in its paranoid pursuit of purity, didn't bother with a trial. They just threw them in the hole. Here is the cosmic irony. It was the despair of being buried alive, the collective psychic scream of thousands of innocent people suffering in the dark, that actually summoned the frenzied flame. The Golden Order created the very evil they were trying to destroy. The Three Fingers manifested in that pit because of the suffering inflicted by the Two Fingers followers. It is a self-fulfilling prophecy of the highest order. This explains the glowing yellow eyes of the merchants we find in the wild. They are touched by the flame, but they are resisting it. They are holding on to their sanity by a thread, often through music. The melody they play is a ward. It keeps the maddening thoughts at bay. When you attack a merchant, they often use frenzied flame incantations. This isn't because they are evil cultists, it's because the flame is the only weapon they have left. It's the weapon their oppressors gave them. The environment of the Cathedral of the Forsaken is masterfully designed to induce anxiety. The walls are not stone, they are bodies. If you look closely at the textures, you see robes, hats, and twisted limbs fused together by the heat of the frenzy and the pressure of the earth. The platforming section requires you to jump on the coffins and heads of the victims. It forces the player to literally walk on the dead to reach the bottom, and at the bottom, the floor breaks. You fall into the presence of the Three Fingers. This leads to a massive community debate regarding the nature of the One Great. When we meet Hyetta, the blind maiden who eats shabriri grapes, which are human eyes, let's not forget that gross detail, she becomes our interpreter for the Three Fingers. She delivers a speech that is arguably the most important theological exposition in the game. She says, "All that there is came from the One Great, then came fractures, and births, and souls. But the greater will made a mistake, torment, despair, affliction, every sin, every curse, every one born of the mistake." The debate centres on this. Is the frenzied flame evil, or is it a valid, albeit terrifying, reset button? The Three Fingers argue that life itself is a mistake because life involves suffering. To exist is to suffer. Therefore, the only way to end suffering is to end existence. To melt it all back down into the One Great, the primordial soup before the Crucible, before the Erd Tree, before individuality. It is the ultimate nihilistic philosophy. Fans argue whether the Three Fingers is an outer god, or if it is simply the shadow of the Two Fingers. If the hand has 5 fingers and the 2 fingers represent order, the 3 fingers represent chaos. Together, they make a whole hand. By cutting them apart, the greater will created an unbalanced world. This duality is physically represented by the fingerprint stone shield found in the platforming section. The description reads, "Part of the tomb of an ancient god, the reader of fingers, carries the fingerprints that ripple the surface." The shield looks like a slab of rock that has been gripped by a giant burning hand. It implies that the Three Fingers has been down there for a long time, clawing at the walls trying to get out, or perhaps clawing at the stone to leave a message. The fingerprint pattern is the symbol of the frenzy. It is the spiral gone wrong. Instead of spiraling up toward the divine, it spirals inward into madness. We also have to talk about the frenzied flame village in Liurnia. This is a location on the surface where the influence has leaked out. The soldiers there are mad, the rats are mad, and overlooking it all is the Tower of Sauron, the frenzied flame tower. The fact that the flame can influence the surface from deep underground proves that the containment has failed. The suffering of the merchants was too great to be buried. It is radioactive, it seeps through the bedrock and drives people mad miles away. The tragedy of the merchants is personalised if you wear the shabriri's woe talisman. This talisman attracts enemy aggression. It is the severed head of shabriri. The description says, "Shabriri, the man who had his eyes gouged out as punishment for the crime of slander." The merchants, in their final moments, or perhaps their descendants, likely exacted this revenge. But it didn't fix anything. The damage was done. The caravan was destroyed. Shabriri became an immortal chaos spirit that can hijack bodies, like Yura's, and the merchants were left to rot. Consider the mechanics of the Lord of Frenzied Flame ending. To access it, you must strip naked. You must remove all your armour, all your weapons, all your defences. You have to stand before the Three Fingers in your most vulnerable, natural state. This is a direct inversion of the Golden Order, which is all about armour, crowns and status. The Three Fingers wants you raw. It burns you, scarring your body with the fingerprint marks. From that moment on, you are a vessel. Melina, your companion who has supported you the whole game, abandons you. She threatens to kill you. Why? Because you have chosen to destroy the world she was born to save. But looking at the pile of merchant bodies, can you blame someone for choosing the flame? If the order of the world allows for the burying of an entire ethnic group to keep a secret, maybe the world deserves to burn. That is the seductive logic of the frenzy. It weaponizes empathy. It looks at the pile of corpses and says, "Look what the gods did. Let's make sure this never happens again by ensuring nothing ever happens again." The note, the Great Caravan. You can buy from a merchant in the Altus Plateau is a heartbreaking piece of paper. It just points you to the capital. The merchant selling it seems unaware of the full scale of the horror, or perhaps he is suppressing it. He is just a survivor, selling tips to a traveller, unknowingly guiding you to the graveyard of his ancestors. It emphasises the disconnect. The surface world has forgotten. The merchants are treated as vagrants, tolerated but ignored, while their history lies festering beneath the king's feet. Then there is the haunting sound design. The violin the merchants play is actually a bow drawn across a stringed instrument that looks like a viola or a rebec. The song is discordant, repetitive, and incredibly sad. In the Prescription Cathedral, the sound is amplified. It bounces off the stone walls and the flesh walls. It isn't a performance, it's a heartbeat. It's the only thing proving they are still alive. When you descend, the music gets louder, not quieter. It surrounds you. It is the auditory manifestation of their grief. We also find the inescapable frenzy incantation down there. The animation for this spell is brutal. You grab the enemy, stare into their eyes, and vomit yellow fire directly into their face. It is intimate violence. It mirrors the madness of the merchants, grabbing someone and forcing them to see the truth that broke your mind. Look at what I see. Feel what I feel. It is the sharing of pain as a weapon. As we stand at the bottom of the pit, staring at the sealed door that looks like melted skin, we realise that the Golden Order isn't just a political regime, it is a crime scene. The Great Caravan wasn't an enemy army. They were people who played music and sold berries, and for that, they were subjected to the worst fate imaginable. The Frenzied Flame isn't an invader from space like the Astels, it is the shadow cast by the Golden Order. It is the accumulation of all the sins Marika tried to hide. And down here, in the dark, the sins are burning bright yellow. Leaving the frenzied yellow screams of the merchant pit, we shift our gaze to a different spectrum of suffering. We move from the madness of the mind to the corruption of the flesh. We are talking about the Scarlet Rot. If you have spent any time in Caelid, and let's be honest, you spent as little time as possible there, you know the look. The skies are bruised red, the ground is a fleshy pulp, and everything looks like it has a fever. But the core in-game fact that changes how we view this biome is that the Scarlet Rot is not a disease, a virus, or a magical poison. It is the radioactive influence of a sealed outer god. When we traverse the Lake of Rot deep underground, we aren't just wading through a swamp. We're wading through the essence of a divine being. The map description and the existence of the Grand Cloister reveal that this area was once a place of worship. The Kindred of Rot, those terrifying centipede men, or pests, are not just random monsters, they are the priesthood. They're worshipping the Rot God, which was sealed away in this subterranean basin long ago. The Scarlet Rot is an invasive theology that rewrites biology. It believes that all things must decay to be reborn, but it accelerates that cycle until life and death blur into a singular, mushy nightmare. But the most fascinating and obscure lore tidbit in this saga concerns the man who sealed this god. We often hear about Godfrey, Radagon, and the demigods, but there is a hero who is never named, only referenced in the descriptions of the blue dancer charm and the flowing curved sword. This hero was a blind swordsman. The legend states that a blind swordsman clad in blue possessed a flowing technique that mimicked the movement of water. He faced the Rot God, yes, the actual deity, and sealed it away. He didn't use holy magic or golden rays, he used the concept of flow. Why flow? Because as we discussed with Godwyn, stagnation is corruption. Running water stays clean, stagnant water rots. The Rot God is the ultimate stagnation. The blind swordsman defeated it by embodying the opposite principle, perpetual motion. This recontextualizes Malenia entirely. We know the blind swordsman was Malenia's mentor. He's the one who taught her the sword. When Malenia performs the waterfowl dance, that move that has caused thousands of broken controllers, she isn't just doing a fancy anime attack. She is performing a ritualistic suppression of the god living inside her. She is flowing like water to keep the rot at bay. Her fighting style is her medicine. This adds a tragic layer to her character. Malenia is often viewed as a proud, undefeated warrior, but in reality she is a vessel constantly fighting a containment war against a cosmic horror in her own blood. Every moment she is still, the rot wins. So she must move. She must dance. Her existence is a constant physical struggle against the divinity that wants to consume her. When she finally blooms in the fight against Radagon, and later against us, it is because she has stopped flowing. She gives in. She breaks the needle, or the discipline, and lets the stagnation take over. The goddess of rot form is not a power-up, it is a possession. Let's talk about the pests or kindred of rot again. Their design is horrific. Too many limbs, a hard carapace, and those human-like hands they use to cast pest threads. But have you listened to their dialogue? Or rather, the dialogue of Gowry, who is one of them in disguise. They view the rot as love. To them, decay is the most intimate form of life. When a body rots, it becomes food for mushrooms, for bugs, for bacteria. It creates more life. The rot god is a god of abundance, just a very gross kind of abundance. They call Malenia mother not because she gave birth to them, but because she is the cocoon. They are waiting for her to fully succumb so their god can be born into the world. This leads to a disturbing fan theory about the scorpion stinger dagger. You find this weapon in the Grand Cloister, locked in a chest surrounded by worshipping pests. The dagger is fashioned from the stinger of a giant glittery scorpion, described as a relic of the sealed outer god. The theory is that the physical form of the rot god, before it was sealed or perhaps its avatar, was a massive scorpion. This fits the astrological and alchemical themes. Scorpio is often associated with death, transformation and poison. It suggests that the Lake of Rot might literally be the crushed remains, or the hemolymph of a giant cosmic scorpion that the blind swordsman slew or trapped beneath the earth. The Mushroom Crown and the Mushroom Lords found in the Lake of Rot suggest a hierarchy. The people who lived down there didn't just die, they adapted. They accepted the rot and became fungal hybrids. This is the rot god's version of grace. The Golden Order gives you gold eyes, the rot god gives you a mushroom head. It's a different form of immortality. You don't die, you just become a colony. We also need to discuss Miquella's role here again. Miquella's unalloyed gold was specifically designed to stop this. He saw that his sister was being eaten by a god. The tragedy is that the blind swordsman's teachings, the flow, and Miquella's science, the needle, were the only things keeping Malenia human. When she fought Radagon, she was desperate. She was stalemated. To break the stalemate, she abandoned her brother's needle and her master's teachings. She nuked Caelid. The devastation of Caelid is the result of a single moment of weakness where the vessel cracked. It shows the terrifying scale of the rot god's power. One bloom destroyed a kingdom. Imagine if the god was fully unleashed. There is a subtle environmental detail in the Halig tree. As you descend towards Malenia's roots, the water becomes filled with rot. But look at the architecture. It is filled with statues of the blind swordsman and the fairy who granted him the sword. Malenia surrounded herself with images of her mentor. It's a shrine to the only person who understood how to help her. Even in her rot-infested sleep, she is holding on to the memory of the Blue Dancer. It is the one pure thing left in her mind. The kindred of Rot's exaltation talisman depicts the pests worshipping. The description says, "Rot for the Scarlet Goddess, the circle of life, the dripping of pus." It's visceral, but it confirms that for a significant portion of the ecosystem, we, the tarnished Golden Order, are the villains. We are the sterile ones. We stop the growth. To a mushroom, a disinfectant is a weapon of mass destruction. The Rot God is simply representing the interests of the bacteria. Corey's questline with Millicent is a masterclass in manipulation. Millicent is a bud of Malenia, a clone or a daughter shed from the rot. Gary wants her to bloom. He guides us to give her the needle, not to cure her, but to make her strong enough to survive the trip to the Halig tree so she can bloom there. He wants to turn her into a Valkyrie, then a goddess. When Millicent realizes this, she chooses to remove the needle and die as herself rather than bloom as a monster. It is one of the most noble deaths in the game. She chooses non-existence over becoming a vessel for the outer god. She rejects the gift of the rot. The visual storytelling of the Yumnya flowers is also worth noting. They are beautiful, vibrant reds and pinks. They look like giant peonies. In a world of grey stone and yellow light, the Scarlet Rot is undeniably colourful. It lures you in. It's the femme fatale of biomes. It kills you, but it makes a lovely garden out of your corpse. This aesthetic duality is central to the Rot God. It is the beautiful death. Unlike the cold grey death of Godwyn, the Rot is warm and teeming. Finally, consider the location of the Lake of Rot relative to the Academy of Raya Lucaria. It is almost directly underneath it. The sorcerers are up there studying the stars looking for primeval currents, while beneath their feet, a primeval biological horror is bubbling. It mirrors the structure of the human mind, intellect on top, reptilian fungal urges at the bottom. The map of Elden Ring is a vertical slice of psychology. The Rot God remains one of the most active threats in the lore. The Elden Beast is dead, the frenzied flame is usually suppressed, but the rot, it's still there. Millennia may be dead, or turned into a flower, but the god itself is an outer god. You can't kill it with a sword. It's still out there in the cosmos or festering deep in the lake, waiting for the next vessel, waiting for the next time the water stops flowing. We step out of the scarlet swamps and the subterranean tombs, shaking the rot from our boots, to gaze into the shadowy history of the Golden Order's very inception. If the Rot God is a horror of biology, the figure we turn to next is a horror of theology. She is the ghost in the machine, the name that has been chiselled off every monument, yet whose influence burns in every black flame thrown by a cultist. We are speaking of the Gloam-Eyed Queen. In the pantheon of Elden Ring mysteries, she is the crown jewel. She is the rival that Marika defeated to secure her age, and her existence proves that the Golden Order was not inevitable. It was simply the winner of a divine battle royale. The core in-game fact that introduces us to her legacy is the presence of the Godskin apostles and nobles. These are some of the most unsettling enemies in the game. The nobles are massive, bloating figures who thrust rapiers with surprising speed, while the apostles are slender, stretching nightmares who peel the skin off their victims. But look at what they are wearing. The Godskin sets are not made of cloth. They are made of smooth, pale skin, specifically the skin of gods. The item descriptions state that these fanatics hunt gods and wear their skin as sacred cloths. This implies that long before the Night of Black Knives, long before we started hunting demigods, there was an entire faction dedicated to skinning divine beings, and they served a queen. The obscure lore tidbit that elevates the Gloam-Eyed Queen from a mere cult leader to a cosmic player is found in the description of the Godslayer's greatsword. This weapon, found in the Divine Tower of Caelid, guarded by a very angry apostle, reveals a bombshell. The Gloam-Eyed Queen led the Godskins and was an Empyrean chosen by the Fingers. Empyrean, that is the key word. Ranni is an Empyrean, Miquella is an Empyrean, Malenia is an Empyrean, Marika was an Empyrean. Being an Empyrean means you are a candidate for godhood. You have been selected by the Two Fingers to be the vessel for the Elden Ring and the vision of the New Age. This means the Gloam-Eyed Queen wasn't a heretic in the traditional sense. She was a legitimate contender for the throne. There was a time, before the Erdtree fully took root, when the Greater Will was betting on two horses, Marika and the Gloam-Eyed Queen. Marika represented eternal life. The Queen represented destined death. The nature of their conflict was ideological. The Gloam-Eyed Queen wielded the power of the Black Flame. Today the Black Flame is a shadow of its former self, but the Scouring Black Flame incantation tells us the Black Flame could once slay gods. But when Malekith sealed destined death, the true power of the Black Flame was lost. This confirms that the Black Flame was the weaponized form of the Rune of Death. The Queen's power was the one thing Marika feared: mortality. Marika wanted an age where no one died. The Queen wanted an age where death was the ultimate authority. This leads to the God Hunt. The lore suggests that in this pre-Erdtree era there were many gods, not necessarily outer gods, but lesser divine beings, perhaps offspring of the Crucible or other pantheons. The Godskins hunted them down. They skinned them to harness their power. It was a brutal, visceral crusade. The Gloam-Eyed Queen wrapped her children in the flesh of her enemies. It paints a picture of a much wilder, more savage era where divinity was something you killed and wore, not something you worshipped in a church. The resolution of this civil war is why Malekith is known as Death of the Demigods. Marika sent her shadow, Malekith, to defeat the Queen. He won. He didn't just kill her, or so we think. He stripped the rune of death from her power source and sealed it into his own flesh, the Black Blade. This act neutered the Black Flame. It turned the Godskins from a terrifying army of Godslayers into a broken cult clinging to a fading fire. When we fight them now, they are ghosts of their former glory, trying to rekindle a flame that has no heat. But the real meat of this section lies in the community debate surrounding the Queen's identity and her connection to Melina. This is arguably the biggest "who is it?" question in the game. Melina, our spectral maiden, has no clear origin. She says she was Born at the foot of the Erd Tree and given purpose by her mother. Most assume her mother is Marika. But look at the Lord of Frenzied Flame ending. If you choose to burn the world, Melina survives, if she didn't burn herself earlier. She appears in the ashes of the capital. Her hair is messy. Her left eye, which is usually tattooed shut, opens, and it is a dusky, gloam-coloured purple. She delivers the line, "I will seek you as far as you may travel, to deliver you what is yours, destined death." The theory is electric. Is Melina the Gloam-Eyed Queen? Or is she the daughter of the Queen? Or perhaps most intriguingly, is she the daughter of Marika and the concept of the Gloam-Eyed Queen? If Marika defeated the Queen and absorbed the rune of death into her order, via Malekith, did she inadvertently give birth to a child who carried that aspect? Melina wields the Blade of Calling, which shares the same moveset as the Black Knife Assassins, who also use the power of death. She's a kindling maiden, born to burn. Fire and death are her domains. The revelation of the purple eye suggests that the Gloam-Eyed Queen's lineage did not end. It merely went dormant, waiting for the Golden Order to burn down so it could open its eyes again. There is also a connection to the Black Flame monks. These monks are found guarding the Godskin temples, but their armour description says they were originally fire monks from the mountaintops of the giants. They were enthralled by the god-slaying Black Flame and betrayed their post. This speaks to the seductive nature of the Queen's power. The Fire Giant's flame is about ruin and burning. The Black Flame is about killing. It's a heavier, weightier concept. The monks saw a fire that could kill the things that defeated their masters, and they switched sides. It highlights the charisma of the Queen. She could turn the Guardians of the Flame of Ruin into her own personal bodyguards. Let's look at the Godskin Swaddling Cloth talisman. The description is disturbing. Sacred cloth of the Godskin Apostles made from immaculate skin. Successive attacks restore HP. It mentions that the Gloam-Eyed Queen would swaddle the newborn apostles in this skin. She wasn't just a leader, she was a mother figure. She raised these monsters from birth, wrapping them in the flayed hides of her enemies. It's a grotesque parody of the Virgin and Child. Instead of swaddling clothes, it's dead gods. Instead of milk, it's black fire. It explains the fanatical loyalty of the Godskins. They aren't just soldiers, they are a brood. The visual design of the Godskin noble, the fat one, is also worth a mention. He has a tail, or rather his robe has a tail, but his physiology is warped. He can inflate himself and roll around like a tire. This connects back to the Crucible. The Gloam-Eyed Queen's era was likely closer to the Crucible era, where distinct physiology was less rigid. The nobles might be incorporating features of the beast they skin, or perhaps their godskin armour literally fuses with them over time, changing their shape. We must also consider the location of the Godskin duo, crumbling Farum Azula. Why are they there? We discussed earlier that Farum Azula is a tomb outside of time. They are guarding the path to Malekith. They are trying to get the rune of death back. For thousands of years, the remnants of the Queen's army have been sieging the temple of the entity that destroyed their mother. It's a vengeance quest that has lasted an epoch. They are there to kill Malekith and unseal the Black Flame. When we arrive, we are interrupting a stalemate between the Skin Takers and the Death Keeper. The Serpent God's curved sword found in the ruin-strewn precipice describes a forgotten religion involving a serpent. The Godskin noble has snake-like features, the long neck, the tail-like robe. Is there a connection to the Great Serpent of Mount Gelmir? Rykard, who let himself be eaten by the serpent to devour the gods, seems to be following in the Gloam-Eyed Queen's footsteps. The Blasphemous Claw, an item given to Rykard by Ranni to fight Malekith, further cements this alliance of death factions. The enemies of the Erdtree all seem to circle back to the methodology of the Queen. If you can't beat them, eat them, or wear them. There is a subtle tragedy in the Queenslayer lore. The Gloam-Eyed Queen lost. Her name was erased. Her fire was dampened. Her children were scattered. But the very fact that Marika had to go to such lengths, creating a shadow-bound beast, sealing the rune, erasing the history, shows how terrified she was. The Gloam-Eyed Queen wasn't a monster in the dark. She was the alternative. She was the road not taken. If she had won, the Elden Ring would have been a very different game. Instead of Golden Order fundamentalism, we might have had the Order of the Black Flame, a world where death is celebrated, where the gods are prey, and where the sky is always the colour of a bruise at twilight. And in the end, if Melina really is her legacy, then the Queen gets the last laugh. Because it is Melina who guides us to the Forge of the Giants. It is Melina who burns the Erd Tree. The daughter of the Gloam-Eyed Queen, metaphorically or literally, is the one who finally strikes the match that burns Marika's golden cage to the ground. The Queen couldn't kill Marika with a sword, so she waited eons and killed her with a girl. From the hidden history of the queens who wished to kill gods, we turn our attention to the king who wished to tame himself. We return to the foot of the Erd Tree, to the burning capital, to witness the final tragedy of the Golden Lineage. We're talking about Godfrey, the first Elden Lord, but we aren't focusing on the man himself. We covered his exile in the Long March. Tonight, we are focusing on the massive spectral lion clinging to his back, Serosh. For most players, Serosh is just a cool visual design, a JoJo stand for a fantasy Viking. But the lore reveals that Serosh is not a pet nor a summon. He is a living straitjacket. The core in-game fact is found in the description of the Godfrey Icon Talisman and the Beastclaw Great Hammer. These items explicitly state that Godfrey, in his days as the chieftain Huaralu, was a ferocious warrior with an insatiable bloodlust. When he vowed to become the Lord of the Golden Order and take Marika as his wife, he realised his savagery was incompatible with civilised rule. He needed a limiter. He needed something to physically and spiritually weigh him down. He took the beast regent Serosh upon his back to suppress his ceaseless lust for battle. This changes the dynamic of the character entirely. When we see Godfrey in the opening cutscene standing tall with the lion roaring over his shoulder, we aren't seeing a man empowered by a beast. We are seeing a man restrained by one. Serosh is the anchor keeping the Huaralu persona submerged. If you look closely at the character model during the fight, Serosh isn't just floating there. His claws are dug into Godfrey's shoulders. His teeth are near Godfrey's neck. It is a relationship built on pain and constant pressure. The lion is literally biting the rage out of him. But here is the obscure lore tidbit that elevates Serosh from a mere tool to a tragic figure. Serosh was a king. The title, Beast Regent, implies a high station. The Beastclaw Great Hammer description calls him the Lord of Beasts. Serosh was likely a high-ranking leader, perhaps the ruler of the Beastmen of Farum Azula, or a king of the pre-Erd Tree era. He possessed high intelligence and wisdom. He acted as an advisor, a counsellor to the Golden Lineage. Imagine that. A giant lion who sat in court meetings, discussing tax policy and military strategy with Godwyn. He wasn't an animal, he was a statesman who happened to be a lion. His decision to bind himself to Godfrey was an act of submission, but also of political alliance. It represented the union of the culture of beasts, the Crucible era, and the culture of men, the Erdtree era. By riding on Godfrey's back, Serosh was symbolically submitting the old world to the new, but he was also ensuring that the new lord didn't go off the rails. It was a check and balance system. Marika married the strongest warrior, but she ensured he came with a built-in kill switch. This context makes the Phase 2 transition one of the most heartbreaking moments in the game. When we push Godfrey to his limit, he realises that order and regency are not enough to defeat us. We are too strong. To survive, he has to stop being a lord and start being a warrior again. He says, "That will be all. Thou didst me good service, Serosh." It is a tender, respectful farewell, and then he kills him. He snaps the neck of his oldest friend, his advisor, his better half. He brutally murders the symbol of his civility. The blood that sprays over Godfrey isn't just for shock value, it is a baptism. He is washing away the Golden Order. He is washing away the Lord. When he screams, "Huaralu's warrior," he is announcing the death of the political figure and the rebirth of the animal. He sacrificed the only creature that truly knew him just for a chance to suplex us into the ground. It shows the terrifying resolve of the man. He is willing to destroy his own soul to win a fight. We must also look at the Golden Lineage through the lens of Serosh. Godric the Grafted, the pathetic runt of the family, idolises Godfrey. He wants to be strong like his forefather, but he misunderstands the assignment completely. Godric grafts a dragon head onto his arm in a desperate attempt to gain power. He forces a connection surgically. Godfrey, on the other hand, bonded with Serosh through a pact. Godfrey carried the beast. Godric is consumed by it. The difference highlights the decay of the lineage. Godfrey controlled the beast within. Godric is just a puppet made of spare parts. There is a subtle connection to the beastmen of Farum Azula here as well. The beastmen possess 5 fingers, a sign of intelligence granted by the Greater Will, or the dragons. Serosh also has 5 claws. He represents the peak of beast evolution, a beast that gained enough sapience to understand the necessity of order. In a way, Serosh was more civilized than Hoaralou ever was. Hoaralou was the savage, the lion was the gentleman. The civilizing force on Godfrey's back was the animal. It flips the standard fantasy trope on its head. Usually the human tames the beast. In Elden Ring, the beast tames the human. The environmental storytelling in the Round Table Hold adds another layer. The dining room has a massive fireplace and a table. We can imagine the demigods sitting there in the height of the Golden Age. We can imagine Serosh lying by the fire, or perhaps sitting in a massive chair offering counsel. The sheer incongruity of a spectral lion acting as a grandfather figure to Godwyn adds a mythical, almost fairy tale quality to the backstory that contrasts sharply with the grim reality of the present. Then there is the weapon, the axe of Godfrey. In the fight it is broken. One of the blades is shattered. Why? The lore suggests it broke during the Long March, or perhaps in the final battle against the Stormlord, but he kept it. He didn't repair it. A broken axe is a symbol of a war that is over. For a lord, a broken weapon is a scepter. It shows he doesn't need to fight anymore. But when he kills Serosh, the broken axe becomes a liability, so he discards it, or uses it with reckless abandon. He fights with his hands because weapons are for soldiers, hands are for killing. There is a thriving fan theory that Serosh is actually an avatar of the Greater Will, similar to the 2 fingers, but for the martial aspect of rule. The theory suggests that Marika didn't trust Hoaralou, so the Greater Will assigned Serosh as a warden. If Godfrey ever tried to rebel or turn against the Order, would Serosh have killed him? The lion's jaws are always around his neck. It's the sword of Damocles made of fur and muscle. The service Serosh did might have been as much about surveillance as it was about suppression. The Beast Champion armour worn by Bernal depicts beasts, but the Elden Lord armour worn by Godfrey depicts the roots of the Erd Tree. However, if you remove the cape, alter the garment, you can see the bands and straps that held Serosh in place. He was wearing a harness. He accepted the burden of the beast willingly. It speaks to the immense sacrifice Godfrey made. He gave up his identity, his Hoaralou-ness, for 1,000 years to be the husband Marika needed. He lived a lie for the sake of the kingdom. When we fight the spectral shade of Godfrey, the Golden Shade, earlier in the game, Serosh is absent. The shade fights with the axe but without the weight of the lion. It feels floatier, less impactful. The real fight with the physical, or semi-physical, Serosh feels heavier. The ground shakes. It conveys the sheer mass of the 2 entities moving as one. The mechanics of the fight enforce the lore. Phase 1 is a rhythmic, disciplined dance, the Lord and the Regent. Phase 2 is a chaotic, tempo-switching brawl, the Warrior. The music shifts from a regal orchestral piece to a pounding, tribal drum beat. The game wants you to feel the loss of Serosh not just visually, but rhythmically. We should also mention the Stormvale Castle connection. The Stormhawks and the lions found in the castle, the ones with blades attached to their legs, are crude imitations of Serosh. The war councillors of Godric tried to weaponize beasts, but they did it by torturing them and strapping knives to them. Serosh was a regent. The lions in Stormvale are just victims. It reinforces how far the Golden Order has fallen. They went from having a Lion King as an advisor to having lions as disposable guard dogs. Finally, let's look at the courtesy line again. I've given thee courtesy enough. He is talking to us, the Tarnished. He respected us enough to fight us as a lord, with rules, with dignity, with Serosh holding him back. But we didn't die. We kept coming. So he decides that courtesy is going to get him killed. He strips away the manners. It is a terrifying compliment. He's saying, "You're too dangerous to be treated like a gentleman. I have to treat you like a beast." As Serosh fades away, dissolving into particles of gold and red, we are witnessing the end of an era. The last vestige of the noble beast archetype dies. All that is left is a man covered in blood, screaming at the sky, desperate to feel the thrill of the fight one last time. Serosh was the conscience of the golden lineage, and when Godfrey kills him, he proves that in the end, power is the only thing that matters in the lands between. The King of Beasts didn't die in battle against a dragon or a god. He died because his best friend needed a power-up, And so we arrive at the end. We have crawled through the sewers, scaled the rotting branches of the Halig tree, peered into the void of the eternal cities, and watched a king snap the neck of his own regent. Now, we step through the fog wall of the Erdtree's heart. We expect to find Marika. We expect to find a person. Instead, we find the cosmos. The final secret of Elden Ring is not a man, or a woman, or even a dragon. It is a bioluminescent space whale that swims through the fabric of reality. We are talking about the Elden Beast, the living incarnation of the Golden Order and the true final boss of the lands between. The core in-game fact that defines this entity is explicit yet mind-bending. The Elden Beast is the Elden Ring. They are not separate things. The description of the Elden Remembrance states, "It was the vassal beast of the greater will and living incarnation of the concept of order." This confirms that the Elden Ring is not just a magical object or a rune, it is a biological organism. It is a parasite, or a symbiote depending on your political leaning, sent from the depths of space to colonize the planet. When Marika shattered the Elden Ring, she didn't just break a law, she physically assaulted a living creature. The cracks in Radagon's stone body are the wounds of this beast. To understand the beast, we must look at the Elden Star's incantation. This legendary spell tells the origin story of the entire setting. It is said that long ago the Greater Will sent a golden star bearing a beast into the lands between, which would later become the Elden Ring. This is the panspermia theory of fantasy. The Divine Order didn't evolve naturally, it was an impact event. A golden meteor crashed into the planet, bringing with it a creature that imposed its own biology and physics onto the local ecosystem. The Crucible, the Great Tree, the dragons, they were already there. The Elden Beast is the alien invader that arrived, set up shop and said, "I am God now." This obscure lore tidbit regarding the Golden Star recontextualizes the geography of the map. Where did this star hit? Many lore hunters point to the massive unnatural crater that forms the Weeping Peninsula's bay, or perhaps the Deeproot depths themselves. But the impact was metaphysical as much as physical. It changed the rules of life and death. The beast is essentially a terraforming engine. It rewrote the source code of the lands between to prioritize order and gold over chaos and crucible. Visually, the Elden Beast is a masterpiece of alien design. It doesn't look like anything else in the game. It has a glassy, nebulous body with a skeletal structure that resembles a central nervous system. It has wings that look like auroras, and it has a crack in its belly glowing with gold, mirroring the damage Marika inflicted. But look closer at the nervous system motif. The beast looks like a brainstem and spinal cord swimming in the ether. This connects to the concept of the One Great. If the One Great was the whole body, the Greater Will and its vassal is the intellect, the ordering principle, the nervous system trying to control the chaotic flesh. The fan theories surrounding the Elden Beast are some of the most existential in the community. The parasite theory argues that the Greater Will is an intergalactic colonizer. It sends seeds, Elden Beasts, to different planets to latch onto the local life, the Great Tree, and feed off the souls of the inhabitants. The Erdtree in this view is a farm. The souls return to the tree not to be blessed, but to be harvested. The Elden Beast is the farm manager. This explains why it fights us. We are burning the farm. We are threatening the harvest. The beast doesn't care about good or evil, it cares about protecting the asset. Then there is the weapon it wields, the sacred relic sword. This is the most disturbing weapon in the game. If you look at the cutscene, the beast grabs Radagon's body, the stone husk we just defeated, and pulls a sword out of it. Or rather, it turns Radagon into the sword. The weapon description reads, "Sword wrought from the remains of a god who should have lived a life eternal." The hilt of the sword is a twisted golden spine. The blade looks like stretched muscle and bone, fossilized into gold. The beast literally uses the body of the current god as a tool to beat you to death. It shows the total lack of respect the Greater Will has for its vessels. Radagon was the loyal hound, the perfect soldier, and in the end he was just a piece of equipment to be used and discarded. The arena of the final fight is equally significant. We are transported to a vast endless sea of water, reflecting giant golden Erdtrees in the distance. These aren't just background art. The multiverse theory suggests that each of those distant trees represents another world, another planet, another Elden Beast. We are standing in the space between spaces, the network of the Greater Will. It implies that the Lands Between is just one franchise in a cosmic chain of golden orders. If we burn this one down, the Greater Will has millions more. It makes our struggle feel incredibly small, yet incredibly significant. We are the one franchise that went rogue. The attacks of the Beast are beautiful and terrifying. It creates the Elden Ring symbol in the sky to trap us. It rains down Elden stars that track us relentlessly. It breathes golden fire. But notice its behaviour. It runs away. It swims constantly, putting distance between itself and the player. This frustrates many players, but it makes narrative sense. It is a cosmic entity. It shouldn't be engaging in a fistfight with a guy in a loincloth. It tries to maintain distance because it views us as a contagion. We are a virus, and it is the immune system trying to flush us out. There is a connection here to the two fingers. The fingers are the envoys, the antennas. The Beast is the transmitter. When we hurt the Beast, we are hurting the signal. The finger creepers, the giant hand enemies, are likely failed attempts to grow new envoys, or perhaps biological waste from the system. But the Beast itself is the hand of God, in a literal sense. It has 5 digits on its wings, hands. It represents the totality that existed before the split. The black hole spot on the Beast's chest is another detail lore hunters obsess over. It resembles a dark star or a void. Is this where the destined death was supposed to go? Or does it represent the emptiness at the centre of order? The Golden Order is shiny and bright, but at its core there is a vacuum. It has no empathy. It has no heart. It is just a machine made of light. When we finally slay the Elden Beast, the message God Slain appears. Not legend felled or demigod felled, God slain. It is the definitive confirmation that we have killed the highest authority in the local system. The body of the Beast dissolves into golden particles returning to the cosmos. But the ring remains. The fractured husk of the Order is left behind for us to mend. This is the ultimate choice. Do we fix the machine, the Age of Fracture? Do we put a new operating system on it, Age of Order, Age of Duskborn, Age of Despair? Or do we melt the hardware down entirely, Lord of Frenzied Flame? Or do we leave the computer behind and go look at the stars, Age of Stars? The Elden Beast's existence proves that divinity in Elden Ring is a lie. The gods aren't magical beings of pure spirit. They are biological entities with agendas, life cycles and weaknesses. They bleed, they can be killed. The Greater Will isn't a benevolent father. It's a distant CEO managing a portfolio of planets, and the Elden Beast was just the branch manager that we had to fire. As we stand in the water, looking at the crumbling remains of Marika, we realise the full scope of our journey. We started as a tarnished of no renown, a dead thing in a ditch, and we ended by swimming into the heart of a star to kill the concept of order itself. We have peeled back every layer of the onion, the demigods, the history, the alchemy, the outer gods, and found that at the centre there was just a beautiful, terrified animal trying to survive. And so, we lay down our swords. The journey through the Lands Between is long, winding, and filled with more sorrow than triumph. We have walked the golden paths of Leyendale, trudged through the rot of Caelid, and shivered on the mountain tops of the giants. We have uncovered secrets that the Golden Order tried to bury under mountains of stone and oceans of blood. We have seen that the history of this world is a history of tragedy, of mothers losing children, of brothers betraying brothers, and of gods who are just as lost as the mortals they ruled. But in uncovering these truths, we grant them a form of peace. The horrors of the Albinaurics, the silence of the merchants, the loyalty of Serosh, they are no longer forgotten. We have witnessed them. And in Elden Ring, witnessing is the most powerful magic of all. Remembrance is how we turn the runes of the fallen into power. We have gathered the lore like scattered grace, holding it close to the campfire light. The fire is dying down now. The embers are fading from red to a soft, dusty grey. The sounds of battle, the clashing of steel, the roar of dragons, the screams of the frenzied, are drifting away, replaced by the gentle hum of the night. The Lands Between are vast, and they will be there when you wake. But for now, you can rest. You have found the sight of grace. You can level up in the morning.